Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting an exciting new series. What if Deku could transform his shape to any size? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by XxAverageZombiexX on Fanfiction.net. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. The sun filtered softly through the curtains of Izuku, Midoriya's room, casting playful shadows that danced on the floor. At just 4 years old, Izuku was a bundle of energy and curiosity, always finding new adventures in the familiar surroundings of his home. Today was no different. The room was a small kingdom of toys, and Izuku was its intrepid explorer. He was particularly engrossed in an epic battle between his favorite action figures, their plastic forms clashing in a miniature skirmish atop his bed. His green eyes sparkled with imagination, narrating the grandiose conflict. But as his excitement peaked, something unexpected happened. A peculiar sensation washed over him, like a wave of tingles starting from his toes and sweeping up to his head. Without warning, the room around him began to expand. His bed, his toys, the very walls themselves grew taller, wider, larger. Or rather, Izuku realized with growing astonishment he was shrinking. His heart raced as he dwindled down to a mere inch tall. The vast expanse of his room transformed into a colossal landscape. His once small toys now towered over him like skyscrapers, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. Izuku stood in awe. The ground beneath him a sprawling expanse of carpet fibers that felt like thick jungle vines. The air around him was different, the sounds magnified in his tiny ears. Every creak of the house, every distant noise felt amplified. He took a few tentative steps, marveling at the sensation of being so small, yet feeling an unexpected surge of strength within his minuscule frame. Suddenly, a new sound reached him, the heavy, rhythmic thud of footsteps. They grew louder, each one reverberating through the ground like an earthquake. Izuku's heart skipped a beat as he turned towards the door. It swung open slowly, revealing the massive figure of his mother, Inko Midoriya. From his minuscule perspective, Inko was a towering giantess. Each of her footsteps sent tremors through the floor, the sound of her shoes hitting the ground echoing in his tiny ears. Her green eyes scanned the room, a look of concern etched on her face. She called out his name, her voice booming and omnipresent. "Izuku, are you okay? I heard a noise." In his shock, Izuku's concentration faltered. The world around him shifted again, and in an instant, he was back to his normal size, sitting on the floor amidst his scattered toys. Inko gasped, clutching her chest in surprise at his sudden reappearance. "Izuku," she exclaimed, rushing over to kneel beside him. "What happened? Are you all right?" Izuku, still wide-eyed and breathing heavily, managed to nod. "I think I have a quirk, Mom. I shrank. Everything was so big." Inko's initial shock gave way to a soft, reassuring smile. She pulled him into a gentle hug, her worry easing into understanding. "Let's go see a quirk counselor, sweetie. They'll help us understand what's happening." A few days later, Izuku and his mother found themselves in the office of a quirk counselor. The room was filled with various tools and gadgets designed to test and analyze quirks. The counselor, a kind woman with warm eyes and a patient demeanor, introduced herself as Ms. Nakano. "Hello, Izuku." "Hello, Mrs. Midoriya." Ms. Nakano greeted them, motioning for them to sit. "Let's see what we can learn about your quirk, Izuku." After listening to their story, Ms. Nakano brought out a small dollhouse and placed it on the table. "Izuku, why don't you try shrinking again and explore this dollhouse? It will help us understand your quirk better." Izuku nodded, concentrating hard. He felt that familiar tingle and watched as the world expanded around him once more. Within moments, he was small enough to fit comfortably inside the dollhouse. Ms. Nakano and Inko observed him closely, noting his increased strength and agility at this reduced size. "Fascinating," Ms. Nakano murmured. "This is quite a unique quirk, Izuku. You'll need to practice controlling it, But I think you could be great hero. She handed the dollhouse to Inko. Take this home with you. Izuku can use it to practice. And remember, control is key. With practice, Izuku will learn to HR and assess his quirk effectively. As they left the office, Izuku felt a mixture of excitement and determination. His journey as a hero was just beginning, and with his new quirk, he knew he had the potential to be something truly special. Izuku's excitement bubbled over as he prepared to showcase his newfound quirk to his friends at preschool. He imagined their wide-eyed admiration, the way they would marvel at his ability to shrink and grow at will. That morning, he eagerly told his classmates to gather around, ready to demonstrate. With a deep breath, Izuku concentrated and felt the familiar tingling sensation as he began to shrink. The other children watched with curiosity as he dwindled down to an inch tall, standing triumphantly among their towering forms. "Look, I can shrink," he declared, his voice small but filled with enthusiasm. However, the reaction was not what he had hoped for. Katsuki Bakugo, a boy with an explosive personality and even more explosive quirk, stepped forward with a smirk. "That's it. You just get small. Where are you, Ant Boy?" The other children laughed, their interest quickly waning. "Ant Boy! Ant Boy!" they chanted, following Katsuki's lead. Izuku's heart sank. The thrill of his discovery turned to dismay. His peers were not impressed. They were mocking him. But even at that young age, Izuku had a resilient spirit. Determined to prove the value of his quirk, he began practicing in secret, honing his abilities both at home and at school. Over the next few years, Izuku became proficient at using his quirk to avoid the bullies who relentlessly teased him. He learned to shrink quickly and quietly, slipping away unnoticed or hiding in places where they couldn't reach him. His resolve to become a hero, despite their taunts, only grew stronger. One day, during middle school, Izuku's quirk revealed an unexpected potential. He was defending a smaller boy from Katsuki, who had once again taken on the role of the aggressor. The boy cowered as Katsuki raised a fist, ready to strike. "Leave him alone, Kakin," Izuku shouted, stepping between them. Katsuki sneered, "Stay out of this, Ant Boy, unless you want to get hurt too." In that moment, Izuku felt a surge of determination. He shrank down to his smallest size and, with newfound strength, leaped up and delivered a powerful uppercut to Katsuki's jaw. The impact sent Katsuki sprawling onto his back, more stunned than hurt. The playground fell silent. Katsuki's cronies, usually quick to join in his bullying, stood frozen in shock. Izuku, still tiny but brimming with adrenaline, stared at his own hands in amazement. He had never felt such power before. As he grew back to his normal size, Katsuki picked himself up, glaring furiously but with a hint of newfound respect. "You got lucky," he muttered, walking away. Izuku realized that the smaller he became, the stronger he got. This discovery fueled his training sessions. He spent hours practicing, experimenting with his size and strength in the safety of his home. Each day, he grew more confident in his abilities. Years later, in the halls of middle school, Izuku was no longer the timid boy who ran from bullies. He had become adept at using his quirk in ways that left his peers in awe. Even Katsuki, though still competitive and brash, acknowledged Izuku's strength in his own way. Izuku's dream of becoming a hero seemed more attainable with each passing day. He knew he had a long way to go, but with his unique quirk and unwavering determination, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. How does this look for the start of the story? The second last year of middle school had begun, a year that carried the weight of anticipation and anxiety for many students. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a year that marked the culmination of years of practice and growth. His quirk had become an integral part of who he was, and his ability to shrink rapidly was now almost second nature. Despite this, he knew that strength alone wasn't enough. He had to be clever and strategic, especially with bullies like Katsuki Bakugo always lurking. At the start of the year, the buzz in the classroom was about the new student. Kusa Nakamura, a girl with an air of mystery and confidence, entered their class. Kushina was quirkless, but she carried herself with a kind of self-assurance that quickly became evident why. She was not one to be trifled with, ready to punch out anyone who dared to pick on her. What Izuku and most others didn't know was that Kushina was a martial arts champion, a fact that would soon reveal itself in an unexpected way. A few weeks into the school year, the inevitable happened. Katsuki and his gang set their sights on Kushina, mocking her for being quirkless. They circled her like predators, goading her into a fight. Kushina, with her fists clenched and a steely look in her eyes, was just about to oblige when something unexpected occurred. Unseen by everyone, Izuku had shrunk down to his smallest size, slipping through the crowd undetected. The first bully felt a sharp, surprising force on his back, causing him to fall flat on his face. The others laughed, thinking he had tripped, until the next bully screamed in agony as his underwear was yanked upwards in a humiliating wedgie. He ran away, red-faced and humiliated, leaving Katsuki to figure out what was happening. "Imp boy, come out and fight me like a man." Katsuki bellowed, his eyes scanning the area. But Izuku was nowhere to be seen. Frustration grew as moments passed without further incident, leading Katsuki to believe Izuku had fled. Just as Katsuki began to relax, he felt an intense, sharp pain at the roots of his hair. Izuku had climbed onto his head, gripping his hair with surprising strength and forcing Katsuki's head to JRK wildly. Katsuki tried to swat him away, but Izuku was too quick. With a well-placed punch, Izuku sent Katsuki sprawling to the ground. Izuku leapt off and returned to his normal size, standing tall and resolute. "How many times do I have to tell you, Kaken? Stop bullying people." Katsuki scoffed, rubbing his sore scalp. He glared at Izuku with a mix of anger and grudging respect before gathering his goons and stalking off. The onlookers whispered among themselves, some in awe of Izuku's bravery, others in fear of Katsuki's inevitable retaliation. As the crowd dispersed, Izuku turned to face the girl he had defended. He expected gratitude, or at least a nod of acknowledgement. Instead, he found himself staring into Kushina's eyes, which were glowing with an intense fury. Her hair seemed to stand on end, and the very air around her vibrated with a murderous aura. Izuku instinctively took a step back, his heart pounding. "I was just trying to help, but..." Kushina shouted, cutting him off. With a swift and precise motion, she delivered a powerful roundhouse kick. Izuku barely had time to register what was happening before her foot connected with his side, sending him sprawling to the ground. The pain was immediate, but it was the shock that left him speechless. Kushina stood over him, her eyes still burning with anger. "I don't need anyone to fight my battles for me. Remember that." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Izuku to nurse his bruised side and wounded pride. The incident left a mark on him, not just physically, but emotionally. It was a stark reminder that not everyone wanted to be saved, and that heroism wasn't always about stepping in. Sometimes, it was about knowing when to step back. A few days after the incident with Katsuki, Izuku found himself thinking more and more about Kushina. Her strength, her confidence, and the way she had so effortlessly put him in his place intrigued him. During lunch, he saw her practicing some kicks on a couple of trees near the edge of the school grounds. The rhythmic thuds of her powerful kicks echoed through the air, drawing his attention. Gathering his courage, Izuku approached her cautiously. "Hey, Kushina," he called out, trying to sound casual. Kushina stopped mid-kick and turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she saw him. Without warning, she spun around and launched a high kick aimed directly at him. Izuku's reflexes kicked in, and he jumped back just in time to avoid her strike. "Why did you do that?" he exclaimed, his heart racing. "I don't have time to chat," Kushina replied bluntly, turning back to the trees and resuming her kicks. "You can either train with me or leave." Izuku hesitated. Training with her was a daunting prospect, but he couldn't deny his curiosity and longing to improve. "All right," he said, stepping forward. "I'll train with you." Kushina didn't acknowledge his agreement with words. Instead, She simply gestured for him to join her. They began with basic drills, Kushina demonstrating various kicks and punches while Izuku tried to keep up. It quickly became apparent that, even with his quirk, he was no match for her. Her reflexes and training were impeccable, as she effortlessly countered his every move. "Use your quirk if you want," she said nonchalantly after a particularly one-sided bout. Izuku shrank down to his smallest size, hoping to catch her off guard. But Kushina's sharp eyes tracked his movements with ease. She dodged his attacks and delivered precise blows that sent him sprawling time and again. Each failure stung, but Izuku's determination only grew. "You're relying too much on your quirk," Kushina said bluntly after yet another defeat. "Until you can knock me down without it, you can't use it anymore." Izuku looked at her in surprise. "But my quirk is my strength. Without it, how can I—" "Strength isn't just about your quirk," she interrupted. "It's about skill, strategy, and understanding your opponent. You need to learn how to fight without relying on your quirk. Only then will you truly become strong." Her words struck a chord with Izuku. He realized that she was right. He had been using his quirk as a crutch, relying on it to compensate for his lack of training. If he wanted to become a true hero, he needed to develop his skills and abilities beyond his quirk. The days that followed were grueling. Every lunchtime, Izuku and Kushina would meet at the same spot, and she would put him through a relentless training regimen. Kushina's training was tough and uncompromising, pushing Izuku to his limits and beyond. They worked on strength, speed, and endurance, but most importantly, they focused on technique. Izuku found himself constantly being knocked down, but he always got back up. Each fall was a lesson, each defeat a stepping stone to improvement. His body ached from the rigorous training, but he could feel himself growing stronger. His reflexes sharpened, his movements became more fluid, and he began to anticipate Kushina's attacks better. Kushina's approach was harsh, but Izuku could see the results. Slowly but surely, he was improving. He could last longer in there. Bouts, land a few hits, and even occasionally force her to block instead of dodge. Yet, despite his progress, he still couldn't knock her down. One particularly hot afternoon, as sweat dripped from their brows and the sun beat down mercilessly, Izuku felt a breakthrough coming. They were sparring as usual, with Kushina launching her precise, powerful kicks. Izuku dodged and parried, trying to find an opening. He noticed a slight shift in her stance, a fraction of a second where she was off balance. Summoning all his strength, he moved in quickly, feinting to the left before darting right. Kushina reacted, but this time Izuku was faster. He delivered a powerful punch to her midsection, followed by a sweep to her legs. For the first time, Kushina stumbled and fell to the ground. Izuku stood there, panting and wide-eyed. He had finally done it. Kushina picked herself up slowly, a small, rare smile playing on her lips. "Not bad, Midoriya," she said, brushing off the dirt. "You've earned the right to use your quirk again." Izuku grinned, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. "Thanks, Kushina. I couldn't have done it without your help." "Don't get too cocky," she warned, though her tone was lighter. "This is just the beginning. If you want to be a hero, you need to keep pushing yourself." Izuku nodded, fully aware of the truth in her words. The road to becoming a hero was long and arduous, but with Kushina's help, he felt more prepared than ever to face the challenges ahead. As they walked back to school, side by side, Izuku felt a newfound respect for Kushina. She had taught him more than just how to fight. She had taught him the value of hard work, determination, and the importance of not relying solely on his quirk. These lessons would stay with him, guiding him as he continued his journey to becoming a hero. A few months had passed since Izuku began his intense training sessions with Kushina. Lunchtimes and recesses had become his battleground, the playground his dojo. Each day, the routine was the same, rigorous sparring sessions under the watchful eyes of his fierce mentor. Though he had yet to win a single match, each defeat was a lesson, each bruise a testament to his growing strength and skill. Izuku had started to learn more about Kushina, though she rarely spoke about herself. One day, As the sun hung high in the sky and the heat of their training session took its toll, Kushina and Izuku took a brief break under the shade of a large oak tree. The ground beneath them was cool, a welcome relief from the intensity of their sparring. Izuku lay on his back, staring up at the leaves swaying gently in the breeze, while Kushina sat with her knees drawn to her chest, a thoughtful expression on her face. After a moment of silence, Kushina broke the stillness. "Izuku," she began, her voice unusually soft. "There's something I want to tell you." Izuku turned his head to look at her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it, Kushina?" She took a deep breath, her gaze distant as she gathered her thoughts. "I never really talk about my parents, but I think you should know about them. My mother, Mido, was known as the Chain Hero, and my father, Hashirama, was the Wood Hero." Izuku's eyes widened. "I've heard of them. They were amazing heroes." Kushina nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "They were. But what made them truly special wasn't just their powers or their hero work. They dedicated a lot of their time to charity and trying to help villains reform and integrate into society." Izuku listened intently as Kushina continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "One day, they were helping a mid-tier villain who wanted to turn over a new leaf. This villain had been trying to escape their old life and become a better person. My parents believed in them and offered their support." She paused, her hands clenching into fists. "But the villain's old boss didn't like that. He saw my parents' efforts as a threat to his control, so he targeted them. My parents were killed because they were trying to help someone. That led me moving to this town to live with my grandparents, Tsunade and Dan." Izuku felt a pang of sadness and anger on her behalf. "I'm so sorry, Kushina. That's terrible." Kushina's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her voice remained strong. "After my parents died, the villain they were helping came forward. They couldn't bear the guilt and wanted to honor my parents' belief in them. They helped the police and the Hero Commission catch their old boss, all because my parents believed in them." Izuku sat up, his heart heavy with the weight of her story. "Your parents were incredible, Kushina. They made a real difference." Kushina nodded, her expression resolute. "That's why I trained so hard, why I push you so much. I want to honor their memory, to live up to the ideals they stood for. They believed in helping people, no matter who they were or what they'd done. I want to be a hero who can do the same." Izuku reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You will, Kushina. You're already on your way, and I'm here to help you, just like you're helping me." Kushina looked at him, a genuine smile breaking through her tough exterior. "Thanks, Izuku. That means a lot." As they resumed their training, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. Kushina's story had given Izuku a deeper understanding of her strength and determination. He admired her even more, knowing the pain she carried and the legacy she aimed to uphold. Together, they continued their journey, driven by the same unwavering goal: to become heroes who could make a real difference in the world. Kushina was relentless, and each sparring session pushed Izuku to his limits. He was getting better, managing to land a few hits here and there, but her reflexes and technique still overwhelmed him. Despite the constant beatings, Izuku's respect for Kushina only grew. Her strength, both physical and emotional, was something he aspired to match. In his quest to improve, Izuku began to experiment with his quirk in new ways. He developed a fighting style that involved rapidly shrinking and growing, aiming to disorient his opponents. The technique showed promise, but it also had its drawbacks. The rapid changes in size left him dizzy and off balance, a weakness Kushina exploited without mercy. The training was grueling. Every lunchtime, Izuku would join Kushina by the large trees at the edge of the playground. She would be there, her face set in a determined scowl as she delivered powerful kicks to the thick tree trunks. The impact of her blows echoed through the air, leaves rustling with each strike. "You're late," she would say without turning, her tone as hard as her kicks. "Sorry," Izuku would reply, quickly dropping his bag and getting into position. They would start with basic drills: punches, kicks, blocks, and dodges. Kushina's movements were fluid and precise, a testament to her martial arts training. Izuku struggled to keep up, his own movements clumsy and slow in comparison. Every time he thought he was getting the hang of it, Kushina would up the intensity, pushing him to the brink of exhaustion. "Don't rely on your quirk," she would snap whenever he tried to shrink mid-fight. "Focus on your technique." Izuku's body ached after each session, but he welcomed the pain. It was a sign that he was growing stronger. He practiced at home as well, working on his form and trying to perfect his rapid size-changing technique. However, the dizziness from the rapid changes continued to be a problem. One day, after a particularly brutal training session, Izuku managed to convince Kushina to come over to his house for dinner after school. He knew it was a long shot, but he wanted her to see a different side of his life. "Come on, it'll be fun," he had said, wiping sweat from his brow. "My mom's a great cook, and she loves meeting new people." Kushina had hesitated, her tough exterior momentarily faltering. Fine, she had finally agreed, much to Izuku's surprise and delight. That evening, Inko Midoriya was over the moon to meet Izuku's new friend. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and she welcomed Kushina with open arms. The Midoriya household was small but cozy, filled with warmth and the delicious aroma of home-cooked food. Inko had prepared a feast, eager to make a good impression. "Oh, you must be Kushina," Inko exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. "Izuku has told me so much about you. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." Kushina tried to maintain her usual cool demeanor, but Inko's warmth and motherly charm quickly began to break down her defenses. By the time dinner was served, even Kushina couldn't resist smiling a little. They sat around the small dining table, plates heaped with food. Inko's stories about Izuku's childhood brought laughter and warmth to the evening. Kushina listened intently, occasionally glancing at Izuku with a newfound curiosity. "He's always been such a determined boy," Inko said, her eyes shining with pride. "Always pushing himself, always striving to be better." At one point, Inko, in her exuberance, draped an arm around Kushina, pulling her into a hug. Izuku seized a moment to snap a picture, capturing the rare sight of Kushina with a genuine, albeit small, smile. When she noticed what he had done, her eyes promised retribution. Izuku gulped, knowing he would pay for it later, but feeling that it was worth it. The dinner went on, filled with stories, laughter, and the sound of clinking utensils. Inko's genuine affection and care melted some of the ice around Kushina's heart. She found herself enjoying the evening more than she had anticipated, feeling a sense of warmth and belonging that she hadn't felt in a long time. After the hearty dinner, Inko excused herself to the kitchen, leaving Izuku and Kushina to explore the rest of the house. With a sense of nervous excitement, Izuku led Kushina down the hallway to his room. He pushed open the door, revealing a space that was both his sanctuary and his hero shrine. The walls were covered with posters of pro-heroes, the largest and most prominent being of All Might, Izuku's idol. Shelves lined with action figures, hero memorabilia, and notebooks filled with hero analysis covered one side of the room. It was a shrine dedicated to his passion and dreams, a testament to his unwavering dedication to becoming a hero. Kushina stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. She walked over to one of the shelves, picking up an All Might action figure and examining it closely. A small, knowing smirk played on her lips as she took in the sheer volume of hero-related items. "Wow, Midoriya," she said, her tone teasing but not unkind. "You're really into this hero stuff, huh?" Izuku, who had been nervously lingering by the door, flushed slightly. "Why, yeah, I guess you could say that. It's kind of my thing." Kushina placed the action figure back on the shelf and turned to face him, her smirk widening. "Kind of. This room looks like a hero museum. I knew you were determined, but this is something else." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. "I just really want to be a hero. All Might's been my inspiration for as long as I can remember." Kushina's eyes softened slightly as she looked around the room again. Despite the teasing, she couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for Izuku's dedication. His room was a reflection of his dreams and the hard work he put into achieving them. She knew that kind of passion wasn't something to be mocked, even if it did provide ample material for teasing. "You know," she said, crossing her arms and leaning against the wall, "I think I'll have to tease you about this later. But for now, it's kind of impressive. Obsessive but impressive." Izuku chuckled, feeling a bit more at ease. "Thanks, I think." Kushina shrugged, her smirk turning into a genuine smile for a brief moment. "Just don't let go to your head, hero nerd." Izuku laughed, the tension in the room dissipating. "I'll try my best." The two stood there for a moment, the room filled with the silent acknowledgement of their growing friendship. Despite the tough exterior and relentless training, Kushina was beginning to see the depth of Izuku's character. And Izuku, in turn, appreciated the way Kushina pushed him to be better, both in their training and in understanding himself. "I want to show you something really cool," Izuku said, before going to set up his laptop on the bed with a movie ready to play. He then arranged small toy cars in front of the screen, creating a makeshift drive-in theater scene. Turning to Kushina, he grinned. "Do you trust me?" Kushina raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Yeah, I guess." Izuku placed a hand on her shoulder and activated his quirk, shrinking them both down to a tiny size. Kushina took a moment to get her bearings, her eyes wide as she looked around at the now gigantic room. The bed loomed above them like a mountain, the laptop screen a towering monolith. "Whoa," she breathed, taking in the surreal transformation. She then noticed Izuku smirking at her and promptly punched him upside the head. "Don't look so smug." Izuku laughed, rubbing his head. "Sorry, couldn't help it." They began their climb up the towering bed, their tiny forms making the journey feel like a mini-adventure. Reaching the top, they navigated the soft landscape of the blanket and made their way to the toy cars parked in front of the giant laptop screen. "Pick a car," Izuku said, gesturing to the small vehicles. Kushina chose a sleek, roofless convertible and climbed into the driver's seat. Izuku darted over to the laptop, using his enhanced strength to jump onto the spacebar and start the movie. The screen flickered to life, casting a warm glow across the room. Returning to the car, Izuku settled into the passenger seat beside Kushina. "This is pretty cool, right?" he asked, looking up at the enormous screen. Kushina nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yeah, this is pretty awesome." As the movie played, the sound and visuals enveloped them, creating an immersive experience. Kushina occasionally glanced over at Izuku, observing his innocent enthusiasm. A blush crept up her cheeks, and without thinking, she lightly punched him upside the head again. Izuku turned to her, confused. "What was that for?" Kushina quickly faced the screen, feigning innocence. "Nothing. Just watch the movie." Izuku shook his head, chuckling softly. The rest of the movie passed in comfortable silence, both of them enjoying the unique perspective provided by Izuku's quirk. The immense size of the screen made every scene more dramatic, every sound more powerful. When the credits began to roll, Izuku stretched and looked over at Kushina. "What did you think?" Kushina leaned back in the tiny car, a content expression on her face. "It was amazing. Thanks for showing me this, Izuku." "Anytime," he replied with a grin. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." They sat there for a moment, basking in the afterglow of their mini-adventure. The giant world around them felt less intimidating now, more like a playground for their imaginations. As they began to grow back to their normal size, Kushina gave Izuku a genuine smile. "You know, you're not so bad, Midoriya." Izuku laughed, feeling a warm sense of accomplishment. "Thanks, Kushina. That means a lot." The evening had turned out to be a success, not just because of the movie or the fun experience, but because it had brought them closer together. Their bond, forged in training and solidified through shared moments like these, was growing stronger with each passing day. As they returned to the living room, Inko greeted them with a smile. "Did you two have fun?" Kushina nodded, her usual tough exterior softened. "Yeah, we did. Thanks for having me over." Inko beamed, her eyes twinkling with happiness. You're welcome anytime, Kushina. Izuku walked her to the door, the air between them lighter than it had ever been. See you tomorrow for training. Of course, Kushina replied, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. But before she left, she leaned in close, her voice low and teasing. And don't think I've forgotten about that picture. Izuku laughed nervously, scratching the back of his head. Yeah, I figured. I'll make it up to you, I promise. As Kushina walked away, Izuku watched her go, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Despite her tough exterior and harsh training methods, she had become a significant part of his life. Her presence had pushed him to grow stronger, both physically and emotionally. A few days after the movie night at Izuku's house, Kushina approached him after school with a peculiar look on her face. Before he could ask what was going on, she grabbed him by the front of his shirt and began to drag him through town. Kushina, what's going on? Izuku asked, stumbling to keep up with her brisk pace. You'll see, she replied curtly, her grip firm and determined. They walked in silence, the bustling sounds of the town fading as they moved toward the outskirts. The journey took them to a small but charming house nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The garden was well kept, with vibrant flowers and neatly trimmed hedges, hinting at the care taken by its residents. This is my grandparents' house, Kushina said, finally letting go of Izuku's shirt and leading him up the front steps. Before Izuku could fully process the situation, Kushina pushed open the door and ushered him inside. The interior was warm and inviting, filled with the comforting sense of home-cooked meals and the faint aroma of fresh flowers. Pictures adorned the walls, telling the story of a loving family. Dan, Kushina's grandfather, greeted them with a kind smile. He was a tall man with a gentle demeanor, his hair a distinguished silver. Hello, you must be Izuku. It's a pleasure to meet you. Izuku bowed politely. Nice to meet you too, sir. Tsunade, Kushina's grandmother, appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her presence was immediately commanding, her eyes sharp and knowing. So this is the famous Izuku I've heard so much about, she said, her tone teasing. Kushina rolled her eyes. Grandma, don't embarrass him. Tsunade smirked. Oh, I'm just getting started. She turned to Izuku, her expression softening slightly. Welcome to our home, Izuku. Make yourself comfortable. The evening unfolded with a mixture of warmth and light-hearted teasing. Dan was kind and engaging, sharing stories and making Izuku feel at ease. Tsunade, on the other hand, spent most of the night gently ribbing both Izuku and Kushina, her teasing remarks always accompanied by a twinkle in her eye. So, Izuku, Tsunade said at one point, how are you handling Kushina's intense training sessions? She can be quite the taskmaster, can't she? Izuku chuckled nervously. Yeah, she really pushes me to my limits, but it's making me stronger. Kushina gave a small, appreciative nod, her usual tough exterior softened by the familial setting. Dinner was a hearty affair, the table laden with delicious dishes that spoke of Tsunade's culinary prowess. Izuku couldn't help but marvel at the spread, feeling a sense of belonging that warmed his heart. As the evening drew to a close, Tsunade decided it was time for a photo. She pulled out an old-fashioned camera and positioned it on a tripod. All right, you two. Come here, she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. Kushina tried to protest. Grandma, do we really need a picture? Tsunade's eyes narrowed slightly, her fierce glare enough to quell any further resistance. Yes, we do. Now come on. With a resigned sigh, Kushina stood next to Izuku, who was feeling both amused and slightly nervous. Tsunade moved in and, with surprising strength, squeezed the two together, her arms wrapping around them both. Smile, Tsunade instructed, her voice firm but affectionate. The camera clicked, capturing the moment. Kushina, despite her initial resistance, couldn't help but smile slightly, and Izuku's grin was wide and genuine. The flash illuminated the room, freezing the memory in time. Perfect, Tsunade declared, stepping back and giving them both an approving nod. Now, wasn't that so bad? Kushina huffed, but didn't argue. Thanks for dinner, Grandma. It was great as always. Dan and Tsunade walked them to the door, bidding them farewell. "You're welcome here anytime, Izuku," Dan said warmly. "Don't be a stranger," Tsunade added with a wink. As they walked back toward town, Izuku felt a sense of warmth and gratitude. "Your grandparents are really nice," he said, glancing at Kushina. "Yeah, they are," Kushina replied, a rare softness in her voice. "Thanks for coming with me tonight." "Anytime," Izuku said with a smile. It was fun. Their bond, strengthened by the shared evening with Kushina's family, felt more solid than ever. As they parted ways, Izuku felt more determined than ever to continue growing stronger, both as a hero and as a friend. That night, as he lay in bed, Izuku couldn't help but think of the day's events. Meeting Kushina's grandparents had given him a deeper understanding of her, and he felt honored to be included in that part of her life. The journey to becoming a hero was filled with unexpected moments and connections, each one shaping him in ways he never anticipated. With a contented sigh, Izuku closed his eyes, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Knowing that he had the support of his friends and the strength of their shared experience, the sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the playground where Izuku and Kushina were sparring. The area was quiet except for the rhythmic sounds of their movements and the occasional grunt of effort. Today, their training session was particularly intense, both of them pushing each other to the limits of their abilities. Izuku and Kushina squared off, the ground beneath them marked by their previous bouts. Kushina's eyes were sharp, focused entirely on Izuku. He mirrored her intensity, ready to show her how far he had come. "Ready, Midoriya?" Kushina asked, her stance firm and unwavering. "Always," Izuku replied, a determined grin spreading across his face. They launched into action, their movements a blur of strikes and counterstrikes. Kushina's kicks were fast and powerful, forcing Izuku to stay on his toes. He dodged and blocked, looking for an opening. Summoning his quirk, Izuku shrank down to his smallest size, hoping to catch her off guard. In his tiny form, Izuku darted around Kushina, aiming quick jabs at her legs. She anticipated his movements, however, and her reflexes were as sharp as ever. Despite his size, she could track him with remarkable precision, a testament to the countless hours they had spent training together. She countered with precise kicks, forcing Izuku to stay mobile. Izuku decided to SWCH tactics. He grew back to his normal size and charged at her, using the momentum to deliver a powerful punch. Kushina sidestepped gracefully, grabbing his arm and flipping him over her shoulder. He hit the ground hard but rolled back on his feet, undeterred. "Not bad," Kushina remarked, a hint of a smile on her lips. "But you'll have to do better than that." Izuku grinned, his determination unwavering. He shrank down again, this time using his enhanced speed to circle around her rapidly. The world seemed to blur as he moved, his tiny form darting in and out of her reach. He aimed for her midsection, hoping to land a decisive blow. But Kushina was ready. She pivoted on her heel, her eyes tracking his movements with uncanny precision. As Izuku closed in, she delivered a swift, low kick that swept him off his feet. He tumbled across the ground, momentarily disoriented by the impact. "Gotcha," she said, her voice calm and confident. Izuku scrambled to his feet, growing back to his normal size. He could feel the strain of the fight, but his resolve only grew stronger. He launched into another series of attacks, mixing in rapid-sized changes to keep her off balance. He shrank again, this time focusing on her blind spots. He darted between her legs, delivering quick jabs to her calves and thighs. Each punch landed with surprising force, causing Kushina to adjust her stance. Taking advantage of the opening, Izuku grew back to his normal size and aimed a powerful uppercut at her chin. Kushina blocked the punch just in time, using the momentum to spin and deliver a roundhouse kick. Izuku saw the kick coming and shrank at the last second, causing her to miss. He used his small size to his advantage, leaping on her shoulder and growing back to his normal size, intending to throw her off balance. However, Kushina was ready. She grabbed his arm mid-transformation and used his momentum against him, flipping him over and pinning him to the ground. Izuku struggled to break free, but Kushina's grip was firm, her training and reflexes far superior. "Nice try," she said, panting slightly but maintaining her hold. "But you're still too predictable with your quirk." Izuku lay on the ground, panting and wincing from the impact. Despite the pain, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He had pushed Kushina harder than ever before, and even though he lost, he knew he was improving. "Thanks, Kushina," he said, accepting her outstretched hand and pulling himself up. "I'll keep working on it." "I know you will," she replied, her smile softening. "That's what makes you a great training partner." As they stood there, catching their breath, Izuku felt a deep sense of camaraderie. Their sparring matches were more than just training. They were a testament to their friendship and their shared determination to become the best heroes they could be. A few days later, after another intense training session, Kushina and Izuku were cooling down, sitting under the shade of a tree. Kushina glanced at Izuku, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Hey, Izuku," she began, a bit more casually than usual. "My grandparents and I are planning a trip to Tokyo this weekend to visit my family's graves. I was wondering if you'd like to come with us." Izuku looked up, surprised by the offer. "Really? I'd love to, Kushina. Thank you for inviting me." Kushina nodded, a small, genuine smile appearing on her face. "Great. I think it would be good to have you there." The train ride to Tokyo was filled with a mix of excitement and quiet anticipation. As the cityscape gradually transitioned into the bustling metropolis of Tokyo, Izuku and Kushina found themselves captivated by the sights outside the window. The towering skyscrapers, neon signs, and endless streams of people were a stark contrast to their quiet leaned forward, his face nearly pressed against the glass. "Wow, Tokyo is incredible. I've read about it, but seeing it in person is something else." Kushina, sitting beside him, nodded. "Yeah, it's a whole different world. There's so much energy here." Tsunade and Dan, Kushina's grandparents, sat across from them, smiling at the kids' enthusiasm. "We're almost there," Dan said, his voice warm. "I hope you're both ready for a meaningful visit." When they arrived, the group made their way to a quaint, traditional inn where they would be staying. The inn was nestled in a quieter part of the city, providing a serene retreat from the urban hustle and bustle. The tatami mats, sliding doors, and tranquil garden gave it an air of calm and reflection. Their first stop was the martial arts school where Kushina had trained. The dojo was a serene space, filled with the echoes of past battles and the quiet DSBLN of its students. Kushina introduced Izuku to a couple of her friends from the school, their eyes bright with curiosity and respect for the boy who had managed to keep up with Kushina. "This is Izuku," Kushina said, her voice carrying a hint of pride. "He's been training with me." One of her friends, a tall girl with sharp features named Hana, stepped forward. "Nice to meet you, Izuku. I've heard a lot about you. Care for a spar?" Izuku agreed and got into the ring with Hana before getting into a stance ready. Hana asked, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Izuku nodded, taking a deep breath. "Ready." The fight began with Hana launching a series of quick, precise strikes. Izuku dodged and blocked, using his quirk to rapidly shrink and grow, making his movements unpredictable. Hana adapted quickly, her reflexes sharp, but Izuku was determined. Hana attempted a sweeping kick, but Izuku shrank at the last moment, slipping under her leg and growing back up to deliver a solid punch to her side. She staggered but quickly recovered, launching a flurry of punches. Izuku shrank again, using his enhanced speed to dart around her and land several quick jabs. The onlookers watched in awe as the two continued their fast-paced duel. Hana, though skilled, found herself increasingly challenged by Izuku's unique fighting style. In a final move, Izuku shrank down and leaped onto her shoulder, then grew back to his normal size to flip her onto the mat, pinning her. Hana laughed, breathless but impressed. "Nice job, Izuku. You got me." Izuku grinned, helping her up. "Thanks, Hana. That was a great fight." The dojo erupted in applause, and Izuku felt a surge of pride. He had proven himself, not just to Hana, but to everyone watching, and felt one step closer to his goal of becoming a true hero. The next day, they visited the graves of Kushina's parents. The cemetery was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of flowers and the soft rustle of leaves. Kushina led Izuku to two modest headstones, each adorned with fresh flowers. "Mito and Hashirama," she said quietly, her voice tinged with reverence. They were incredible heroes. They dedicated their lives to helping others, even villains who wanted to change. Izuku listened intently as Kushina spoke about her parents, her usual tough demeanor softened by the memories. She recounted how they had worked tirelessly to reform a mid-tier villain, only to be targeted by the villain's old boss. Despite their tragic end, their legacy lived on, inspiring others to continue their work. They believed in redemption, Kushina said, her voice barely above a whisper. They believed that anyone could change if given the chance. Izuku felt a surge of admiration and respect for her parents. He could see where Kushina got her strength and determination. Without thinking, he reached out and hugged her gently. For a moment, she stiffened, but then she relaxed, allowing the comfort of the embrace. "Thank you for sharing this with me," Izuku said softly. Kushina nodded, her eyes misty. "Thank you for being here." After their visit to the cemetery, Izuku and Kushina spent the rest of the day at the martial arts school. Kushina introduced Izuku to some more of her old friends, who welcomed him warmly. They all gathered in the training area, the anticipation of a good workout evident in their expressions. "All right, Midoriya, show us what you've got," Kushina said with a smirk, tying her hair back and stepping into a sparring stance. Izuku nodded, feeling both nervous and excited. He joined the group in their drills, moving through sequences of punches, kicks, and blocks. The rhythm of the practice was intense, and Izuku quickly realized how much he could learn from these experienced martial artists. During a break, one of Kushina's old friends, a boy named Mikoto with a friendly demeanor and a strong build, approached Izuku. "Hey, Midoriya," he said, offering a hand. "I'm Mikoto. It's good to meet you." Izuku shook his hand, smiling. "Nice to meet you too." Mikoto glanced over at Kushina, who was busy demonstrating a complex move to another student. "You know, I'm really glad Kushina made friends with you. She's always been so focused and driven, but it seems like you've helped her lighten up a bit." Izuku blinked in surprise. "Really? I always feel like she's the one pushing me to be better." Mikoto laughed. "That's just her way. But trust me, it's good for her to have someone like you around. You both balance each other out." Izuku felt a surge of warmth at Mikoto's words. "Thanks, Mikoto. That means a lot." They rejoined the group for more sparring matches, and Izuku found himself paired with Mikoto. The two exchanged blows and techniques, pushing each other to improve. Izuku used his quirk to shrink and dart around, while Mikoto's powerful strikes kept him on his toes. The friendly competition was invigorating, and Izuku felt his skills sharpening with each round. As the day turned to evening, the students gathered for a final bow, thanking the sensei for the session. The camaraderie and respect in the room were palpable, and Izuku felt honored to be part of it. Kushina walked over, a satisfied look on her face. "Not bad, Midoriya. You held your own." Izuku grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thanks, Kushina. This was incredible." As they left the dojo, Mikoto called out, "Take care, Midoriya. Keep training hard." Izuku waved back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the experience. The day at the martial arts school had not only strengthened his body, but also his bond with Kushina and her friends. It was a day he would carry with him as he continued his journey toward becoming a hero. On the last day of their trip to Tokyo, Kushina and Izuku found themselves standing outside a bustling arcade. The neon lights flickered invitingly, and the sounds of laughter and electronic games spilled out onto the street. "I can't believe you convinced me to come here," Kushina said, a skeptical look on her face. Izuku grinned, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Come on, Kushina. We've been training so hard. We deserve a little fun. Kushina sighed, but couldn't help a small smile from forming on her lips. All right, but just this once. As they entered the arcade, the overwhelming sights and sounds enveloped them. Rows of games stretched out before them, each one more colorful and enticing than the last. Izuku's excitement was infectious, and even Kushina found herself getting caught up in the energy of the place. They started with a classic, the claw machine. Izuku eagerly inserted a coin and maneuvered the claw, trying to grab a plush toy. His first few attempts were unsuccessful, but his determination only grew with each failure. Kushina watched, amused by his persistence. "You're never going to get it at this rate," she teased. Izuku grinned. "Watch me." On his fifth attempt, the claw finally grabbed hold of the small All Might plushie and lifted it to the prize chute. Izuku's face lit up with triumph as he retrieved his prize and handed it to Kushina. "Here, souvenir," he said, beaming. Kushina rolled her eyes, but accepted the plushie with a small smile. "Thanks, Izuku." They moved on to the racing games, where Kushina's competitive spirit came to life. She easily outmaneuvered Izuku on the virtual track, laughing as she crossed the finish line ahead of him. "Looks like I've still got the upper hand," she said smugly. Izuku laughed, shaking his head. "I let you win." "Sure you did," she replied with a grin. Their day continued with more games, each one adding to the fun and camaraderie between them. They played skee-ball, air hockey, and even tried their luck at a dance game, where Kushina's martial arts skills translated surprisingly well to the rhythm-based challenge. As the afternoon turned to evening, they found themselves at the prize counter, exchanging their tickets for small trinkets and candy. Kushina couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth and contentment, despite her initial reluctance. "Okay, I admit it," she said as they left the arcade, the neon lights reflecting in her eyes. "That was actually fun." Izuku smiled, his heart full. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. We needed a break." Kushina nodded, her expression softening. "Yeah, we did. Thanks, Izuku." Their day at the arcade was a brief respite from their rigorous training and the emotional weight of their visit. It strengthened their bond, reminding them that even in the pursuit of their dreams, there was always room for a little fun and friendship. After returning from Tokyo, Izuku and Kushina wasted no time resuming their intense training regimen. The memories of the trip, the solemn moments at the graves, and the fun at the arcade all felt distant as they focused on their immediate goal, preparing for high school. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the playground as they faced each other, the familiar tension of an impending spar hanging in the air. Izuku felt a new surge of confidence, ready to test out some moves he had observed and practiced briefly during their trip to Tokyo. "Ready, Midoriya?" Kushina asked, her stance firm and her eyes sharp. Izuku nodded, mirroring her stance. "Always." They launched into action, their movements a blur of strikes and counterstrikes. Kushina's kicks were as fast and powerful as ever, but Izuku had a new strategy. He focused on his footwork, incorporating a couple of swift, evasive maneuvers he had learned from watching Kushina's friends at the martial arts school. As Kushina aimed a high kick at his head, Izuku shrank down to his smallest size, darting beneath her leg and popping back up behind her. Instead of delivering a straight punch, he used a spinning back fist he had seen in Tokyo, catching Kushina off guard and landing a solid hit on her shoulder. Kushina staggered slightly, but quickly regained her balance, a glint of surprise and respect in her eyes. "Nice move," she acknowledged, rubbing her shoulder. "Where'd you learn that?" "Picked up a few things in Tokyo." Izuku replied with a grin, not letting his guard down. Kushina's expression turned serious again. "Show me what else you got." They continued to spar, with Izuku incorporating more of the techniques he had observed. He used his quirk to rapidly shrink and grow, combining it with the new moves to create an unpredictable fighting style. At one point, he executed a flawless sweep kick, tripping Kushina and forcing her to roll away to avoid a follow-up attack. Kushina, though impressed, was not one to be easily defeated. She adapted quickly, countering his new moves with her superior reflexes and experience. In the end, she managed to catch Izuku mid-shrink, pinning him to the ground with a swift and decisive maneuver. "You're getting better, Izuku," she said, slightly out of breath but smiling. "But don't think you can beat me that easily." Izuku grinned up at her, panting but exhilarated. "I know, but I'll keep trying." Kushina helped him up, and they stood there for a moment, catching their breath. The sparring session had been intense, but it had also shown just how much Izuku had grown. The trip to Tokyo had not only deepened their bond, but also enhanced their skills, bringing them one step closer to their dreams. "Good job today," Kushina said, patting him on the back. "Let's keep pushing ourselves. Is just around the corner." Izuku nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "Right. Let's give it everything we've got." "You still rely on your quirks so much," Kushina, delivering a swift kick that Izuku barely dodged. "Focus on your technique," Izuku nodded, panting as he blocked the strike. I know. I'm trying." He redoubled his efforts, concentrating on his form and footwork. His quirk was a powerful tool, but Kushina's relentless training taught him that true strength came from mastering the basics. The progress was slow, but it was there. With each session, Izuku could feel himself getting better, his confidence growing. As the end of the school year approached, the atmosphere in their classroom grew tense with anticipation. One day, their homeroom teacher decided to ask the students about their future aspirations. "All right, class," he said, scanning the room with a knowing smile. "I know most of you have your sights set on becoming heroes, but let's hear it. What do you all want to do after graduation?" Katsuki Bakugo, never one to shy away from the spotlight, leapt to his feet. "I'm going to be the only one from this school to get into UA," he declared, his voice brimming with confidence and a hint of arrogance. The class erupted in murmurs, some students nodding in agreement while others rolled their eyes. The teacher chuckled, shaking his head. "Yes, Bakugo, we know you're aiming high." Then the teacher turned to Kushina and Izuku, a hint of skepticism in his eyes. "And what about you two?" Kushina met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "We're aiming for you, as well," she said firmly. A few students snickered, and the teacher raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's good to have goals," he said, a touch patronizingly. Izuku felt a pang of frustration, but forced himself to remain calm. He had learned to tune out the doubters and focus on his path. He glanced at Kushina, who seemed completely unfazed by the whispers and smirks. "Ignore them," she said quietly to Izuku. "We know what we're capable of." Izuku nodded, his resolve hardening. "You're right. We'll show them." Despite the mockery from some of their classmates, Izuku and Kushina's determination never wavered. They spent every spare moment training, honing their skills, and pushing each other to new heights. Izuku focused on improving his physical abilities, running drills and strength training exercises that left him exhausted but exhilarated. Kushina was relentless, her own strength and skills serving as both inspiration and challenge. They sparred endlessly, each match a blend of strategy and brute force. Izuku's quirk was always in the background, a tool he used sparingly and strategically, but his reliance on it had lessened considerably. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session, they collapsed onto the grass, staring up at the sky. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the playground. "We're getting there," Kushina said, her voice tired but satisfied. "Yeah," Izuku agreed, wiping sweat from his brow. "We are." The path to UA was filled with obstacles, but they faced them together, their shared goal uniting them. Izuku knew that with Kushina by his side, he was stronger and more determined than ever. As they lay there, catching their breath, he felt a surge of gratitude for her friendship and guidance. "We'll make it," Izuku said softly, more to himself than to her. Kushina glanced over at him, a small smile on her lips. "DM in, right we will." With the end of middle school in sight and UA on the horizon, Izuku and Kushina's journey was just beginning. Their dreams of becoming heroes were closer than ever, and nothing would stand in their way. Izuku and Kushina faced each other, ready for one last sparring session of the day. This time, Izuku had decided to challenge himself by not using his quirk. "Ready, Midoriya?" Kushina asked, her eyes focused and determined. "Ready," Izuku replied, adopting a defensive stance. They launched into action, their movements fluid and precise. Kushina's strikes were swift and powerful, each blow requiring all of Izuku's focus and skill to block or evade. Despite not using his quirk, Izuku moved with newfound confidence, his training evident in every motion. Izuku ducked under a high kick and parried a series of rapid punches. He countered with a quick jab to Kushina's side, causing her to take a step back. Sensing an opportunity, he pressed forward with a combination of punches and kicks, each one pushing her further on defensive. Kushina, however, was relentless. She recovered quickly, her movements becoming a blur of attacks. Izuku managed to block and dodge most of her strikes, but she was faster and more experienced. A feint to the left followed by a swift kick to his midsection knocked the wind out of him. He staggered but remained standing, determined to keep fighting. With a final burst of speed, Kushina delivered a low sweep that took Izuku's legs out from under him. He fell to the ground, panting and exhausted, but with a look of satisfaction on his face. He had put up a good fight, better than ever before. Kushina extended a hand to help him up, a proud smile playing on her lips. "You did great, Izuku. You're really getting good without your quirk." Izuku took her hand and got to his feet, breathing heavily but smiling. "Thanks, Kushina. I've been working hard." Kushina nodded, her expression serious but encouraging. "Now you just need more practice to include your quirk in fights without putting yourself in harm's way. You've got the skills, you just need to integrate them better." Izuku nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "I will. Thanks, Kushina." They stood there for a moment, the bond between them stronger than ever. Each sparring session, each challenge, brought them closer to their goals of becoming true heroes. With Kushina's guidance and his own unwavering resolve, Izuku knew he was on the right path. Izuku and Kushina wrapped up the intense training session. Their breaths were heavy and sweat glistened on their brows, but there was a sense of satisfaction in the air. They had pushed each other hard, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. Izuku wiped his face with a towel and turned to Kushina. "Hey, Kushina, did you finish all the paperwork for the hero course? The deadline's coming up soon." Kushina hesitated for a moment, her expression shifting from one of determination to something more apprehensive. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Actually, Izuku, there's something I need to tell you." Izuku's curiosity was piqued. "What is it?" Kushina looked away for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I'm not entering the hero course, at least not right away." Izuku's eyes widened in shock. "What? Why not?" Kushina sighed, her gaze meeting his. "I know this might seem sudden, but I've been thinking about it a lot. I was offered a recommendation spot for the hero course through some of my parents' old friends. But after considering it, I decided to start in the general education course and then transfer to the hero course later." Izuku was taken aback, struggling to process her words. "But why, Kushina? You've trained so hard for this." Kushina nodded, her expression serious. "I know, and I still want to be a hero. But I feel that starting in Gen Ed will give me a more rounded education. I want to experience different aspects of you, and make sure I'm fully prepared. It's a decision I made after a lot of thought." Izuku was silent for a moment, trying to absorb the news. He respected Kushina immensely, and her decision, though surprising, made sense in its own way. "I understand, Kushina. It's just I didn't expect this." Kushina gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I know, it wasn't an easy decision, but I think it's the right one for me. And I'll still be there at UA. We'll still train together and work towards our goals." Izuku felt a mixture of emotions, surprise, respect, and a bit of sadness at the thought of not having Kushina by his side in the hero course from the start. But he knew that this was her path, and he had to support her. "I respect your decision, Kushina. I know you'll excel no matter where you start, and we'll make it to the hero course together." Kushina's smile widened, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "Thanks, Izuku. That means a lot. We'll both get there, one step at a time." As they packed up their gear and headed home, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. They were on different paths, but their ultimate goal remained the same. Together, they would overcome any obstacles and become the heroes they aspired to be. Kushina then got back into position for another spar as Izuku did the same. The sun was casting a warm glow over the streets as Izuku and Kushina walked home after their intense training session. The exhaustion from their workout was evident, but so was their determination. They chatted about their goals and the upcoming entrance exams for UA, their excitement palpable. Today was tough, Kushina remarked, stretching her arms. But we're getting stronger every day. Izuku nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Yeah, I can feel it. We're going to make it into UA. I know it. As they turned a corner, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a horrifying sight. A massive, slimy sludge villain emerged from the shadows, its grotesque form undulating menacingly. The villain's eyes locked onto them, and it lunged forward with a guttural roar. Instinctively, Izuku activated his quirk, shrinking himself and Kushina just in time to dodge the initial attack. They rolled to safety, regaining their normal sizes and preparing to fight back. We got to be careful, Izuku said, his eyes focused on the villain. Stay behind me. Kushina smirked, her fists clenched. I don't think so. We do this together. Just as they were about to engage, a powerful gust of wind blew through the alleyway. Out of nowhere, All Might appeared, his larger-than-life presence dominating the scene. With a single, mighty punch, he scattered the sludge villain, its form splattering harmlessly against the walls. Don't worry, citizens. I'm here, All Might declared, his booming voice filled with confidence. Izuku watched in awe as All Might expertly gathered the remnants of the sludge villain and sealed them into a bottle. His eyes lit up with an idea. Perhaps he could use his quirk to capture villains in a similar fashion. The thought filled him with excitement and possibility. All Might turned to Izuku and Kushina, his smile broad and reassuring. You two were very brave. You must have some great quirks if you weren't afraid of that villain at all. Kushina's expression darkened slightly at his words. She crossed her arms, clearly put off by the implication that their bravery was solely due to quirks. Yeah, thanks, she replied curtly. Izuku, noticing Kushina's reaction, tried to bridge the gap. Thank you, All Might. You were amazing. All Might gave him a thumbs up before tucking the bottle into his pocket. Stay safe, young heroes, he called out before leaping into the air, his powerful legs propelling him high above the city. As All Might disappeared into the distance, neither Izuku nor Kushina noticed the bottle slipping from his pocket, tumbling unnoticed to the ground below. They stood there for a moment, absorbing the incredible encounter. Did that really just happen? Izuku asked, his voice filled with awe. Kushina's expression softened slightly, but she still seemed annoyed. Yeah, it did. But it takes more than having a quirk to be brave. Izuku nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. You're right. But still, I think I've got a new idea for my quirk. Kushina raised an eyebrow, curious despite herself. Oh yeah, what is it? Izuku grinned. I think I can capture villains, just like All Might did with the sludge villain. As they continued their walk home, the excitement of the encounter with All Might fueled their determination even further. They knew that their journey was just beginning, and with each step, they were closer to achieving their dreams of becoming heroes. But unbeknownst to them, the sludge villain's bottle lay forgotten on the ground, a potential threat waiting to be discovered. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the bustling streets. Izuku and Kushina, still energized from their earlier training session, walked through the city, discussing their strategies and plans for the upcoming UA exams. The streets were crowded, filled with the usual hustle and bustle of city life. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a loud commotion. A crowd had gathered, and panicked voices filled the air. Izuku's heart raced as he and Kushina pushed their way to the front, their eyes widening at the sight before them. The sludge villain from earlier had reemerged, and this time, it had ensnared Katsuki Bakugo, who was struggling violently within its grasp. The so-called heroes stood around, looking hesitant and unsure, their faces masked of indecision. Izuku felt a surge of frustration and determination. Without a second thought, he grabbed Kushina's hand and activated his quirk, shrinking them both to a minuscule size. They slipped through the crowd unnoticed, darting forward with a sense of urgency. As they neared the villain, Izuku released his quirk, returning Kushina to her normal size while he remained small and perched on her shoulder. "Let's do this," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the noise. Kushina nodded, her eyes steely with resolve. She sprinted forward, dodging the explosive blast from Katsuki's trap form. In one fluid motion, she leaped into the air, aiming a powerful punch at the Sludge villain's eye. Simultaneously, Izuku jumped off her shoulder, delivering a precise punch to the other eye. The villain recoiled, its grip on Katsuki loosening momentarily. Kushina landed gracefully, taking a step back with Izuku back on her shoulder, both of them poised for the next move. "He's weakened," Kushina observed, but her voice was tense. The Sludge villain, though damaged, began to thrash violently, hurling tentacles of sludge in all directions. The crowd gasped as the villain's attacks became more erratic. Kushina dodged a tentacle that lashed out towards her, while Izuku shrank down and leaped from her shoulder, darting around the villain's body to avoid the flying debris. "We need to keep him distracted," Kushina shouted, her fists clenched. Izuku nodded, using his small size to dart in and out of the villain's reach, delivering quick punches and kicks. The villain roared in frustration, its movements growing more frenzied with each hit. Kushina seized the opportunity, rushing forward to land a powerful kick to the villain's midsection. The impact caused the villain to stagger, but it quickly retaliated, swinging a massive tentacle towards her. She barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side and coming up in a defensive stance. Izuku, seeing an opening, grew back to his normal size and aimed a kick at the villain's core. The Sludge villain howled in pain, its grip on Katsuki weakening further. For a moment, it seemed like they might be able to defeat it, but then, the villain lashed out with renewed fury, sending a barrage of sludge tentacles flying towards them. Kushina was forced to backflip out of harm's way, while Izuku shrank again to avoid the attack. "We need to keep him off balance," Izuku yelled, his voice high-pitched from his tiny form. Kushina nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. She launched herself at the villain again, this time aiming for its vulnerable spots. Her fists and feet were a blur of motion, each strike precise and powerful. Izuku joined her, using his quirk to dart in and out, landing blows wherever he could. Just as the situation seemed to be escalating beyond their control, a thunderous bang echoed through the air. All Might landed between the villain and the pair, his presence commanding and powerful. "Don't worry, young heroes. I am here," he declared, his voice resonating with authority. With a single, mighty punch, All Might shattered the Sludge villain, scattering its remains and freeing Katsuki. The explosive youth fell to the ground, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with shock and relief. Izuku and Kushina watched as All Might stood tall, the remnants of the villain dispersing in the wind. The crowd erupted in cheers, their faith in heroes restored. Katsuki slowly got to his feet, his breaths ragged. He looked at Izuku and Kushina, his usual scowl softened by an unspoken gratitude. For a brief moment, his eyes conveyed a mix of thanks and a hint of respect. "Bakugo, are you okay?" Izuku asked, stepping forward. Katsuki didn't respond immediately. He dusted himself off, his pride wounded but intact. With a huff, he turned away, his voice gruff. "I'm fine. I didn't need your help." Izuku and Kushina exchanged a glance, understanding the complexities of Katsuki's pride. They knew he would never openly admit his gratitude, but the look in his eyes was enough. All Might approached them, a broad smile on his face. "You two were incredible, brave and quick-thinking. You showed real hero potential." Izuku's heart swelled with pride, and he couldn't help but grin. "Thank you, All Might. We just did what we had to." Kushina nodded, her expression serious but satisfied. Yeah, we couldn't just stand by. All Might gave them a thumbs up before turning to address the crowd and the gathered heroes. As the excitement began to die down, Izuku and Kushina felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced a real threat and emerged stronger, their bond as friends and future heroes more solid than ever. As they walked away from the scene, the cheers and applause still ringing in their ears, they knew that their journey was just beginning. The path to becoming true heroes was fraught with challenges, but they were ready to face them together. Later that evening, after Kushina had gone home, Izuku found himself walking through the quiet streets, his mind buzzing with the day's events. The encounter with the Sludge villain and All Might's words of encouragement had left him feeling exhilarated yet contemplative. As he neared his neighborhood, he saw a familiar figure leaning against a lamppost, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his usual scowl etched on his face. "Kakin," Izuku called out, surprised to see his old friend and rival. Katsuki looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Deku," he greeted tersely. Izuku walked closer, sensing that Katsuki had something on his mind. "What are you doing here?" Katsuki pushed off the lamppost and stepped towards Izuku, his expression unreadable. "You and that girl, Kushina," he began, his voice low and intense. "You still planning to go to UA?" Izuku nodded, his heart pounding. "Yeah, we are. We've been training hard for it." Katsuki scoffed lightly, a bitter edge to his laugh. "You think you can actually make it in?" "UA? That's no joke, Deku." "I know," Izuku replied, his voice steady. "But we believe in ourselves. We're going to give it everything we've got." Katsuki turned his back to Izuku, taking a few steps away. For a moment, it seemed like the conversation was over, but then he stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "At least you two won't slow me down like my so-called friends," he said, his tone dismissive yet lacking its usual venom. Izuku watched as Katsuki continued to walk away, his words hanging in the air. There was something different in the way Katsuki had spoken, less contempt and more a grudging acknowledgement of their efforts. "Thanks, Kakin," Izuku called out, his voice filled with a mix of determination and gratitude. "We won't." Katsuki didn't respond, his figure gradually disappearing into the night. Izuku stood there for a moment, contemplating the brief exchange. It wasn't an open admission of respect, but it was something. For Katsuki, it was as close to a compliment as he might ever get. As Izuku resumed his walk home, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path to UA was daunting, but he wasn't alone. With Kushina by his side and the fire of their shared dreams burning brightly, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The encounter with Katsuki, the fight with the Sludge villain, and All Might's encouragement, all of it strengthened his resolve. They were on the right path, and nothing would deter them from becoming the heroes they aspired to be. Izuku woke up on the day of the entrance exam for the hero course. The morning sun had barely begun to filter through his curtains, casting a soft glow around his room. He had set his alarm a little earlier than usual, eager but slightly anxious about the day ahead. Feeling the need to calm his nerves, Izuku decided to go for a short run. He walked to the corner of his room where, on his desk, he had set up a miniature track field, a project that Kushina had helped him with. The small track had become a sanctuary for both of them, allowing them to train indoors when the weather was bad or when they just wanted to change of pace. The setup was impressive. The desk held a small, oval-shaped running track, complete with tiny lane markings. An obstacle course was laid out with random objects, designed to challenge their agility and coordination. A regular-sized stopwatch sat ready, and Izuku had rigged it so he could control it with his watch while he was small. Izuku shrank down to his smallest size on a chair before jumping up to the desk. The track seemed massive from his reduced perspective, and he felt a thrill of excitement. He started with a warm-up lap, his tiny feet pounding against the smooth surface of the track. His confidence grew with each step, his earlier anxiety fading with the rhythm of his run. After about half an hour of running, Izuku transitioned to the obstacle course. He darted between miniature hurdles, leaped over tiny barriers, and weaved through an intricate maze of objects. His body moved with the ease and precision born from countless hours of training. Completing the course twice, he felt a surge of accomplishment. Just as he was finishing his second run, the giant ringing of his cell phone alarm echoed through the room, signaling that it was time to get ready for the day. Izuku took a deep breath and grew back to his normal size, feeling more centered and focused. Izuku quickly showered and dressed in his uniform, the anticipation of the entrance exam buzzing in his veins. Today was the day he had been preparing for, the day that could shape his future. Izuku made his way to the kitchen, where the comforting scent of breakfast greeted him. His mother, Inko, was bustling around, preparing a meal that would fuel him for the challenges ahead. "Good morning, Mom." Izuku greeted her, his voice steady but filled with excitement. Inko turned and smiled warmly at him. "Good morning, Izuku. Are you ready for your big day?" Izuku nodded, his confidence bolstered by his morning run and Kushina's encouragement. "Yeah, I think I am." At breakfast, Izuku sat with his mother, Inko, who had prepared a hearty meal to fuel him for the important day ahead. As they ate, Izuku couldn't help but share his excitement about a new hero he had been following. "Mom, did you hear about Mount Lady? She debuted recently, and her quirk works the opposite way of mine. She can grow to a gigantic size. I was thinking if I could talk to her, maybe we could share notes about her quirks," Izuku said, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Inko smiled warmly at her son's excitement. "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Izuku. I'm sure she'd be interested in meeting you too. Just remember to focus on your exam today, okay?" "I will, Mom," Izuku replied, finishing his breakfast. He felt a mix of nerves and excitement bubbling inside him. After breakfast, Inko gave Izuku a big hug, holding him tightly for a moment. "I'm so proud of you, Izuku. Good luck today. You'll do great." "Thanks, Mom," Izuku said, hugging her back before grabbing his bag and heading out the door. As he stepped outside, Izuku instinctively shrank to dodge a kick aimed at his head. He immediately grew back to his normal size and swung a punch, which was expertly blocked. Kushina stood there with a smile, dropping her stance. "Did you really think I wouldn't go with you on such an important day?" Izuku rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "I just thought we'd meet up there." Kushina's stare told him to shut up. "Let's go, Midoriya." As Izuku and Kushina made their way towards high school, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the city streets. The air was filled with anticipation and excitement, and both of them could feel the weight of the day ahead. Kushina glanced at Izuku, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "By the way, Izuku, my grandparents want to take you and your mom to dinner later." Izuku looked at her, curiosity piqued. "Really? Why?" "They want to reward us for cleaning up the beach," Kushina explained. "They were really impressed with how we handled it." Izuku smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "That's great. I'd be happy to accept. It took a long time to clean that beach up, but it was worth it." Kushina nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it was. Though I have to admit, it was a lot of hard work." Izuku chuckled, remembering the countless hours they had spent hauling garbage and debris off the beach. "It would have been quicker if I could have used my quirk more." As soon as the word quirk left his mouth, Kushina hit him lightly upside the head. "Midoriya, I'll let you use your quirk plenty, but I wanted us to do most of the work by ourselves. It was good training and it built character." Izuku rubbed the back of his head, giving her a flat look. Yeah, I know. But still, it would have been a lot easier with my quirk." Kushina sighed, but there was a hint of a smile on her face. "Besides, my grandparents paid for the truck to take it all away. All we had to do was move and load the stuff." Izuku couldn't help but laugh. "I guess you're right. And I suppose it was good training. We got stronger because of it." Kushina's smile widened. "Exactly. And it showed us that we can accomplish a lot when we work together." As they continued walking, the impressive silhouette of high school came into view, its towering buildings and expansive ground a testament to its prestigious reputation. Izuku's heart swelled with excitement and a touch of nervousness. "Well, I'm looking forward to dinner then," Izuku said, feeling grateful for Kushina's grandparents' generosity. It'll be nice to relax and celebrate after today. Yeah, we deserve it, Kushina agreed. And don't worry, we'll ace this exam. Izuku nodded, his determination renewed. Right, let's do this. They approached the gates of UA, the atmosphere electric with the energy of countless hopeful students. Izuku took a deep breath, ready to face the challenge head-on. With Kushina by his side and the support of their families, he felt more confident than ever. Here we go, Kushina said, giving him a reassuring pat on the back. Izuku smiled, feeling a surge of determination. Yeah, let's show them what we're made of. Together, they stepped onto the grounds of UA high school, ready to take the first steps towards their dreams of becoming heroes. The atmosphere at UA high school was electric with excitement and nervous energy as Izuku and Kushina walked through the grand gates. Students from all over, each with their unique quirks, filled the grounds, chatting animatedly and preparing for the entrance exam. Izuku couldn't contain his excitement. His eyes darted around, taking in the various students and guessing at their quirks. I wonder what kind of quirks everyone has, he muttered to himself. That guy has wings, I wonder how big they can get one out. And that girl over there has a tail. She might have enhanced agility or strength. This is incredible. He continued to mutter rapidly, lost in his thoughts and speculations about the other students. His excitement took over, and he started walking ahead, his pace quickening with his muttering. Kushina, walking beside him, sighed in exasperation. Midoriya, don't ignore me, she called out, but Izuku was too absorbed in his own world to hear her. Feeling annoyed at being ignored, Kushina decided to take matters into her own hands. She stepped forward and tripped Izuku lightly, causing him to stumble. Just as Izuku was about to fall, a soft voice spoke up. Whoa, careful there. Ochako Uraraka appeared beside them, her hand outstretched. She touched Izuku lightly, activating her quirk and making him float gently above the ground. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise as he found himself hovering. Oh, thank you, Izuku exclaimed, his face turning red with embarrassment as he realized he had been muttering to himself and not paying attention. Ochako smiled warmly. No problem. I'm Ochako Uraraka. Are you okay? Izuku nodded, his feet touching the ground as she deactivated her quirk. Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks to you. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Kushina rolled her eyes playfully, giving Izuku a light tap on the shoulder. Try to stay grounded, Izuku. Literally. Izuku chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his head. Sorry about that. I get caught up in my thoughts sometimes. Ochako laughed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. It's okay. I think we're all a bit nervous and excited today. Kushina extended her hand to Ochako. I'm Kushina. Thanks for saving him from face-planting. Ochako shook her hand, smiling. Nice to meet you both. Let's do our best today. As the three of them walked together towards the main building, Izuku felt a sense of camaraderie forming. Meeting new friends and sharing this experience made the anxiety of the entrance exam feel a bit more manageable. Izuku glanced at Kushina, who gave him an encouraging nod, and then at Ochako, who was chatting animatedly about the exam. He felt a surge of determination. Today was the day they would take the first step towards their dreams of becoming heroes. With newfound confidence and the support of his friends, Izuku knew he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead at UA high school. Izuku, Kushina, and Ochako made their way through the bustling hallways of UA high school, the excitement and tension palpable in the air. They found their assigned seats in a large exam hall, which was filled with rows of desks, each equipped with a neatly stacked set of test papers. Izuku sat down at his desk, his heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. He glanced around at the other students, each one focused and ready for the challenge ahead. Kushina was seated a few rows behind him, her eyes steady and calm as she prepared herself mentally. Ochako, sitting nearby, gave him an encouraging smile. All right, everyone, please take your seats and prepare for the written exam, announced a stern-looking proctor from the front of the room. You have 1 hour to complete the test. Begin when you hear the signal. Izuku took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The proctor pressed a button, and a soft chime signaled the start of the exam. Izuku picked up his pen and started reading through the questions. The exam covered a wide range of subjects, from basic academics to hero-related knowledge. The first section focused on math and science, areas where Izuku felt relatively confident. He quickly worked through the problems, his pencil moving swiftly across the paper. The next section was history, with questions about notable heroes and significant events in the history of hero society. Izuku's eyes lit up as he recognized many of the topics. His countless hours of studying and his obsession with heroes were paying off. He answered each question with precision, drawing from his extensive knowledge. The final section was more specialized, dealing with ethics and hero laws. These questions required careful thought and a deep understanding of what it meant to be a hero. Izuku paused for a moment, considering each scenario presented. He knew that being a hero wasn't just about strength or quirk power. It was also about making the right choices and protecting others. As he wrote his answers, he could hear the soft rustling of papers and the scratching of pens all around him. The pressure was intense, but Izuku remained focused, determined to give his best effort. Time seemed to fly by, and before he knew it, the proctor announced that there were only 5 minutes remaining. Izuku reviewed his answers quickly, making sure everything was complete. He felt a sense of satisfaction and relief as he put down his pen. "Time's up. Please stop writing and remain seated until we collect your papers," the proctor instructed. Izuku leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He glanced over at Kushina, who gave him a thumbs up, and Ochako, who looked relieved. They had all worked hard to get to this point, and the written exam was just the first hurdle. As the proctors collected the test papers, Izuku felt a renewed sense of determination. The written exam was behind them, but the real challenge was yet to come, the practical exam. He knew that he and his friends would need to give everything they had to succeed, but for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. They had made it this far, and together, they would face whatever came next. After the written exam, the students began to disperse. Kushina gave Izuku a supportive pat on the back before heading home, while Izuku and Ochako made their way to the buses that would take them to the hero assessment site. As they walked, the anticipation of the practical exam loomed large in Izuku's mind. He and Ochako chatted nervously about what might be in store for them, trying to keep each other's spirits high. Suddenly, Katsuki Bakugo appeared from the crowd, bumping lightly into Izuku. "You won't do better than me, nerd," he muttered, a smirk on his face before heading to his assigned bus. Izuku watched Katsuki walk off, feeling a familiar mix of rivalry and determination. He turned to Ochako with a confident smile. "Let's do our best, Uraraka." They boarded their bus, the air buzzing with the excitement and anxiety of the students. The ride was filled with hushed conversations and the occasional nervous laugh. When they finally arrived at the assessment site, they were greeted by an expansive training ground designed to mimic a cityscape, complete with towering buildings and winding streets. President Mick's voice boomed over the intercom, explaining the rules. "All right, listeners, here are the ground rules for the hero assessment. You will be battling various robots, each worth different points. Take down as many as you can to score high." As President Mike continued, a tall, blue-haired boy raised his hand, interrupting the explanation. "Excuse me, sir. I have a question about the zero-pointer robot mentioned in the exam guide." President Mike paused, about to respond, when the boy glanced over at Izuku and Ochako. "And you," he said, pointing at Izuku, "stop whispering and disturbing others. We need to hear the rules clearly." Izuku looked at the boy with a single eyebrow raised. His voice was calm but firm. "We're not disturbing anyone. Let's let President Mike finish explaining the rules." The blue-haired boy sputtered, clearly not expecting Izuku to talk back to him. Fine." President Mike seized the moment to continue. "Thanks, kid. Now, as for the zero-pointer, it's a massive obstacle meant to be avoided, not fought. Focus on the other robots to rack up your points." "Got it." The students nodded, and a tense silence fell over the group as they processed the rules. Present Mick's voice rose again, full of enthusiasm. All right, heroes in training, get ready. The gates are about to open. With a loud mechanical whir, the gates began to open, revealing the sprawling city battle zone beyond. The excitement and fear in the air were palpable. A loud horn blared, signaling the start of the assessment. Izuku took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenge ahead. Beside him, Ochako gave him an encouraging nod. Let's do this, Midoriya. Right, Izuku replied, his determination renewed. Let's show them what we can do. With that, the students surged forward, charging into the city battle zone to face their first true test of heroism. The gates of the mock city opened wide, and Izuku charged forward with a determined gleam in his eye. He had trained for this moment, and now it was time to prove himself. The city was a chaotic battleground, with robots of various sizes wreaking havoc. Izuku shrank down to his smallest size, darting through the legs of the other examinees, his eyes scanning for his first target. He spotted a group of robots clustered together. Growing back to his normal size, he sprinted towards them, his fists clenched and ready. As he approached, he shrank down again, zipping around the robots' legs and delivering powerful punches to their joints. The robots toppled over, their systems sparking and shutting down. Izuku didn't stop to celebrate. He was already growing and moving on to the next threat. In one fluid motion, Izuku shrank a piece of rubble, lifted it easily, and hurled it at an approaching robot. As the rubble flew through the air, it returned to its original size, smashing into the robot and disabling it. The tactic worked perfectly, and Izuku used it several more times, shrinking debris and launching it at the robots with devastating accuracy. Amid the chaos, Izuku heard a cry for help. He turned to see two students trapped under a pile of rubble, with a robot closing in on them. Without a moment's hesitation, Izuku shrank down and dashed over to them. He touched the piece of rubble, shrinking it to free the students before growing back to normal. Thank you, one of the students exclaimed, tears of relief in their eyes. Izuku gave them a quick nod before turning back to the battle. He spotted another group of robots and decided to try a new tactic. He shrank down and darted between the robots' legs, touching each one briefly and shrinking them down to the size of toys. He scooped the miniature robots into his pockets, effectively capturing them and rendering them harmless. As he continued his rampage, taking down robots left and right, he heard a voice. Behind you. Izuku turned just in time to see a massive robot bearing down on him. He shrank down and dodged its attacks, using his agility to stay one step ahead. He leaped onto the robot's shoulder, grew back to his normal size, and delivered a powerful punch to its control panel, causing it to shut down. Suddenly, another group of robots appeared, advancing towards a group of students who were cornered and unable to escape. Izuku's eyes narrowed with determination. He shrank down and sped towards the group, his mind racing with a plan. Growing back to his normal size, he picked up a large piece of rubble and shrank it down. He threw the tiny piece with pinpoint accuracy, watching it grow back to its original size mid-air and crash into the robots. The impact disabled several of them, giving the trapped students a chance to escape. Go! Get to safety! Izuku shouted, waving them towards a safe zone. The students nodded and ran, glancing back at him with gratitude. Izuku turned his attention back to the remaining robots. He darted forward, shrinking down and slipping between their legs. He grew back to normal size and delivered a series of rapid punches and kicks, dismantling the robots piece by piece. As he moved through the city zone, Izuku's eyes constantly scanned for more students in need of help. He spotted a boy struggling to fend off a robot with limited success. Izuku shrank down, zipped over to the boy, and grew back to normal size. Let me help, he said, leaping at the robot and using his quirk to shrink it down to the size of a toy. He caught the miniature robot and placed it in his pocket. The boy looked at Izuku with amazement. Thanks. I couldn't have done that without you. No problem. Just stay safe, Izuku replied, giving him a reassuring nod. Continuing his path of destruction, Izuku took down robot after robot, his movements a blur of speed and power. His training with Kushina had honed his martial arts skills, and, combined with his quirk, he was a formidable force on the battlefield. He used his quirk creatively, shrinking and growing to outmaneuver his opponents and using the environment to his advantage. Suddenly, another group of robots appeared, advancing towards a group of students who were cornered and unable to escape. Izuku's eyes narrowed with determination. He sprinted towards them, his mind racing with a plan. Growing back to his normal size, he saw a large pile of rubble blocking the students' escape route. He placed his hand on the pile, focusing his quirk. He had never tried this before, but there was no time to hesitate. He felt a surge of energy as his quirk expanded, shrinking the entire pile of grabbed the shrunken pile of rubble and hurled it at the approaching robots. As the pieces left his hand, they grew back to their original size, crashing into the robots and destroying them. The impact was devastating, and the robots were quickly reduced to scrap. Blinked in surprise at his own success, but there was no time to dwell on it. He turned to the students, waving them towards safety. Go! Get out of here while you can. The students nodded and ran, glancing back at him with gratitude. Izuku turned his attention back to the remaining robots. He darted forward, shrinking down and slipping between their legs. He grew back to normal size and delivered a series of rapid punches and kicks, dismantling the robots piece by piece. As the students fled to safety, Izuku took down the robot with a series of powerful punches. The robot's systems sputtered and failed, and it collapsed to the ground. Breathing heavily, Izuku took a moment to catch his breath. He scanned the area, seeing more robots and students in need of help. He knew the exam wasn't over yet, and there were still challenges to face. With renewed determination, Izuku charged forward, ready to continue his mission of kicking robot, but in saving as many students as he could. He was proving himself as a hero, and nothing would stand in his way. The battle against the robots had been fierce, but Izuku remained focused. He had already saved several students and taken down numerous robots, using his quirk creatively and efficiently. However, the true test was about to come. Suddenly, a loud, metallic roar echoed through the mock city. Izuku turned to see the massive zero-pointer robot stomping through the streets, causing widespread panic among the examinees. Most students wisely avoided it, knowing it wasn't worth any points. But then, Izuku's heart skipped a beat as he heard a familiar scream. Ochako Uraraka was trapped under a pile of rubble, directly in the path of the zero-pointer. The blue-haired boy from earlier was about to run in the opposite direction. Izuku's mind raced. Forget the stupid test and help me save her. Izuku yelled, his voice filled with urgency. The blue-haired boy hesitated, his eyes darting between the zero-pointer and Ochako. For a brief moment, he seemed torn. Then, another scream from Ochako made up his mind. He nodded, determination setting in. Izuku shrank down to his smallest size and leaped onto the blue-haired boy's shoulder. Let's go, he shouted. The boy, with his powerful legs, sprinted towards Ochako. They reached her just as the zero-pointer's massive foot was about to come down. Izuku grew back to normal size and jumped off the other kid's shoulder, rolling to his feet next to Ochako. Without missing a beat, he placed his hand on the rubble, pinning her, and focused his quirk. The entire pile shrank down instantly before he grew back to normal size. Up, get her out of here. Izuku yelled to Ida. Ida scooped Ochako into his arms and ran, his speed leaving a blur in his wake. The zero-pointer, still towering and menacing, turned its attention towards the fleeing students. As its foot came crashing down, narrowly missing them, Izuku knew he had to act fast. Ignoring the pounding in his head and the strain on his body, Izuku ran towards the zero-pointer. He reached out and touched its massive leg, concentrating harder than he ever had before. He felt a surge of energy as his quirk activated, and the giant robot began to shrink. The zero-pointer's colossal form reduced down to the size of a toy. Izuku staggered back, the effort leaving him drained. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath, his vision swimming. The strain of shrinking something so massive hit him all at once, and he doubled over, emptying his stomach onto the ground. The world around him seemed to blur as he tried to regain his composure. His body felt heavy, and his head throbbed painfully. But then he heard the distant sound of the final buzzer, signaling the end of the exam. Students began to gather, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. Ida and Ochako approached Izuku, their expressions filled with gratitude and concern. "You did it, Midoriya," Ochako exclaimed, her voice shaky but grateful. "You saved me." Ida nodded, his usual stern expression softened. "That was incredible. You truly acted like a hero." Izuku managed a weak smile, his body still trembling from the exertion. "I just did what I had to," he said, his voice hoarse. As they made their way to the exit, the other students looked at Izuku with a newfound respect. He had not only demonstrated his quirk's potential, but also his unwavering determination and heroism. The exam had tested them all in ways they hadn't expected, but Izuku knew that he had given it his all. Outside the exam grounds, the instructors and proctors began to take note of the day's events. Izuku caught a glimpse of All Might in his civilian form, giving him a subtle nod of approval. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to Izuku. The exhaustion from the day's events was catching up to him, but the sense of accomplishment and the encouragement from his peers and mentors gave him strength. He had proven himself in the face of overwhelming odds, and now the future held endless possibilities. Izuku took a deep breath, looking around at the faces of his fellow examinees. They had all given their best, and now they would await the results. Whatever happened next, Izuku knew he had taken the first step towards his dream of becoming the greatest hero. As the students dispersed, Izuku walked alongside Ida and Ochako, feeling a bond forming between them. They had faced a tremendous challenge together and emerged stronger for it. With the entrance exam behind them, they were ready to take on whatever came next. "Let's head home and rest," Ida suggested, his voice filled with determination. "We've got a bright future ahead of us." Ochako nodded in agreement, her eyes sparkling with hope. "Yeah, we did great today. I'm excited to see what's next." Izuku smiled, feeling the same excitement and hope. "Me too. Let's do our best together." With that, they parted ways, each one looking forward to the future with renewed determination. Izuku knew that the path to becoming a hero was long and challenging, but he was ready to face it head-on, with friends by his side and a heart full of hope. In the observation room of a high school, the faculty gathered to watch the hero entrance exam unfold on a wall of monitors. Midnight, Aizawa, Nizu, All Might, Present Mike, and Vlad King were all present, their eyes fixed on the various screens displaying the students' performances. "Look at that one," Vlad King commented, pointing at a monitor. "That kid's explosion quirk is incredible. He looks like he's having the time of his life at an amusement park." Aizawa nodded, his eyes narrowing. "He's powerful, but he needs to learn control. He's a bit too reckless." Midnight's attention shifted to another screen. An interesting mop of green hair caught her eye. "Who's that?" she asked, leaning forward. "His quirk is listed as Shrink." She read from the document in front of her. "Allows him to shrink himself and others." A brief blush crept onto her cheeks as she imagined the potential uses of such a quirk. Aizawa quickly noticed. "Get your mind out of the gutter, Midnight," he admonished, his tone dry. Midnight laughed lightly, flicking her hair back. "You're such a prude, Aizawa." Their banter was interrupted as they watched the green-haired boy, Izuku Midoriya, in action. He was prioritizing helping other students, saving them from danger and guiding them to safety. "He's helping others a bit too much, isn't he?" Aizawa observed. "Almost looks like he's trying to prevent them from getting points." Present Mike shook his head. "Give the kid some slack, Aizawa. He looks like he's genuinely trying to help." Nizu, the principal, turned to All Might. "You met this boy, didn't you? What do you think?" All Might reflected for a moment, a flashback to his brief encounter with Izuku crossing his mind. He remembered the determined look on the boy's face as he ran forward without hesitation, eager to help despite the danger. He has a strong sense of justice, All Might said, his voice thoughtful. From my brief interaction with him, he seemed serious about helping others, even in a test situation. He's not trying to hurt the chances of others. He's just genuinely driven to assist. The staff's eyes followed Izuku's actions closely. They watched as he shrank pieces of rubble and hurled them at robots, the debris growing back to its original size upon impact and effectively destroying the machines. Midnight laughed out loud when Izuku shrank a few robots and placed them in his pocket. "That's creative," she said, impressed. "I've never seen anyone use their quirk like that before." They continued to observe as Izuku moved through the exam area, balancing his efforts between taking down robots and rescuing other students. His resourcefulness and dedication were clear, and it was evident that he was making a significant impact. Nizu finally decided it was time to activate the zero-pointers. "Let's see how they handle the real challenge," he said, pressing a button on his console. The monitors showed the massive robots being released into the various exam arenas. The faculty watched as the blonde explosion boy immediately took off towards the zero-pointer in his area, aiming to blow up its head. Their attention then shifted back to Izuku's arena. President Mike moved his hand towards the emergency off SWCH as he saw the zero-pointer about to step on Ochako Uraraka. However, All Might stopped him. "Wait," All Might said, his voice firm. "The path of a true hero is often blocked by real obstacles." Aizawa's eyes widened slightly when Izuku yelled at the blue-haired boy, "Ida, to forget the test and help save Ochako." The staff watched in tense silence as Izuku shrank down and jumped onto Ida's shoulder. Ida then sprinted towards Ochako with incredible speed. The zero-pointer's massive foot was descending upon Ochako when Ida reached her. Izuku grew back to normal size and touched the rubble, pinning her, shrinking it instantly. Ida picked up Ochako and ran, narrowly avoiding the robot's next attack. As the robot turned to pursue, Izuku reached out and touched its leg. The staff watched in awe as he used his quirk to shrink the colossal machine down to the size of a toy. The strain of the effort caused Izuku to fall to his knees, emptying his stomach onto the ground from the exertion. "Remarkable," Nizu said, his eyes twinkling with interest. He managed to shrink the zero-pointer. The final buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the exam. The students began to gather, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. "He has the heart of a true hero," All Might said, his voice filled with admiration. "He's willing to push himself to the limit to save others." The staff exchanged looks, recognizing the potential in the green-haired boy. As they watched the students leave the exam grounds, it was clear that Izuku Midoriya had made a lasting impression. Izuku arrived home after the exhausting yet exhilarating day at UA High School. As he opened the front door, the familiar warmth of home greeted him. His mother, Inko, was waiting for him with a welcoming smile. She immediately wrapped him in a tight hug. "Welcome home, Izuku. How did it go?" "Although I'm sure it went great," Inko said, her eyes sparkling with pride. Izuku couldn't contain his excitement. With a huge smile, he lifted her off the ground in his embrace. "It was amazing, Mom. I got to see so many quirks in action, and I met a girl and a boy who I think might become my friends." He paused, his voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty. "I'm not entirely sure, but I'm thinking positively." Inko laughed softly as Izuku set her down. "I'm so happy for you, Izuku." She waved her hand in front of her nose playfully. "But you definitely need a shower." Izuku chuckled, his cheeks flushing slightly. "Right, sorry, Mom." As he turned to head to his room, he remembered something important. "Oh, and Kusa and his family wants to take us out to dinner later." Inko's eyes lit up. "That sounds like fun. Now go on and get cleaned up." She gently shooed him towards the bathroom. Izuku made his way to his room, his mind buzzing with the day's events. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to Kushina, letting her know that his mom was happy to join them for dinner. Tossing his phone onto his bed, he began gathering clothes for a shower. As he rummaged through his pockets, he felt something unexpected. His eyes widened as he pulled out several shrunken robots from his pocket. Whoops, I forgot about these, he thought, staring at the tiny machines in his palm. Some were broken from the journey, but a few were still functional, and there were more in his pocket. He looked around his room, his mind racing. Spotting a shoebox, he opened it and carefully moved the tiny robots and the broken pieces into the box. He placed the lid back on and slid the shoebox under his desk. Something to think about later, he muttered to himself. Maybe Kushina will know what to do, maybe no one will even notice they were gone. Pushing the thoughts aside for now, Izuku decided to focus on the immediate task at hand. He left his room and walked into the bathroom, ready to wash away the grime and exhaustion of the day. In one of high school's many specialized workshops, Power Loader stood over a large table, staring down in disbelief at the toy-sized zero-pointer robot. The tiny machine, once a towering menace in the entrance exam, now looked almost comical in its shrunken form. Power Loader's eyes were wide with shock as he leaned in closer, trying to process what he was seeing. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the diminutive robot, confirming that it was indeed real and not some elaborate prank. Tears welled up in his eyes and began to roll down his cheeks. "I can't believe it," he murmured, his voice shaky. All the work, all the technology reduced to this. Cementos, standing nearby, watched his friend with a sympathetic expression. He walked over and gently patted Power Loader on the back. There, he said in a calming tone. "It's just a robot. You can rebuild it." Power Loader shook his head, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. "It's not just about rebuilding it, Cementos. It's the principle of the thing. This zero-pointer was supposed to be indestructible, a true test for the students. And now look at it reduced to a toy." Cementos nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind Power Loader's words. "I understand. But think about it this way. Whoever did this showed incredible ingenuity and power. Isn't that what we're looking for in future heroes?" Power Loader sniffled and nodded slowly. "You're right. I guess I should be proud that one of our students was able to do this. It just took me by surprise." Cementos continued to pat his back, offering comfort. "It's a testament to the creativity and strength of our students. And hey, don't forget you have a new student from the Hatsum family coming into your department soon. Why not take this as an opportunity? Have the kid take it on as a challenge to improve the robots." A small smile began to form on Power Loader's face as he looked up at Cementos. "You know, that's a great idea. This could be a perfect project to see what they're capable of." Cementos smiled back. "Exactly. Turn this into a learning experience for both you and the students. You never know what kind of innovations might come out of this." Power Loader nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "All right then, let's get this little guy back to the lab and see what we can learn from it. And I'll start preparing the project for a new student." Together, they carefully picked up the toy-sized zero-pointer and began to make their way to the lab, ready to turn this unexpected turn of events into a new challenge and a learning opportunity for the next generation of heroes and inventors. Katsuki Bakugo walked up the steps to his home, the adrenaline from the entrance exam still coursing through his veins. He had given it his all, blasting through robots with a ferocity that left no doubt in his mind about his performance. He was confident he had secured his place in high school's hero course. As he opened the door, the familiar scent of home greeted him. His parents, Mitsuki and Masaru Bakugo, were waiting for him with eager smiles. The moment he stepped inside, his mother rushed forward and pulled him into a tight hug. "Katsuki, how'd it go?" Mitsuki asked, her eyes shining with pride and curiosity. Masaru joined in, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Welcome home, Katsuki. We knew you'd do great." Katsuki allowed himself a rare smile as he hugged his parents back. "Of course I did great. Those robots didn't stand a chance." Mitsuki laughed, ruffling his hair. "That's my boy. We're so proud of you." Masaru nodded, his expression warm. "You've worked so hard for this. Let's celebrate tonight." Katsuki grinned, feeling a swell of pride and satisfaction. He broke away from the hug and headed to his room, eager to unwind after the intense day. As he walked through the familiar halls of his home, he felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a strange twinge of unease. Once in his room, Katsuki dropped his bag on the floor and collapsed onto his bed. He pulled out his phone, checking for messages or notifications. It struck him as odd that he hadn't heard from his usual hangout buddies, Tsubasa and Akira, in the past couple of days. Normally, they'd be blowing up. His phone with messages about plans or just random banter. Idiots, he muttered under his breath, scrolling through his messages and finding nothing new from them. Probably too busy doing something stupid. Despite his harsh words, a small part of him wondered if something was up. He wasn't the type to worry about others easily, but their silence was unusual. Shaking off the feeling, Katsuki decided it wasn't worth his time to dwell on it. He tossed his phone onto his bed and stared at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed in his mind. The robots, the adrenaline, the competition. He had pushed himself to the limit and felt confident in his abilities. But as much as he tried to focus on his success, his mind kept drifting back to the strange absence of his friends. Whatever, he said to himself, sitting up and shaking off the thoughts. I've got bigger things to worry about. With a determined expression, Katsuki got up and headed to his desk, pulling out his notes and plans for future training. He couldn't afford to let distractions get in his way. High school was just the beginning, and he was determined to become the #1 hero. As he immersed himself in his plans, the unease slowly faded, replaced by the familiar drive and ambition that fueled him. He would confront whatever challenges lay ahead, and nothing, certainly not the absence of a few idiots, would stand in his way. He was ready for whatever came next, and he would face it head-on, just as he always did. Lying back on his bed, Katsuki's thoughts turned to the future. He knew deep down that Izuku wasn't just some extra, and that girl Kushina had a fire in her that would push him as well. They would both help drive him to be the best, not that he would ever let them know that. Best not to let their egos get any bigger. A small smirk crept onto his face. Deku and that girl better be ready. I'm not letting anyone outshine me, he muttered to himself. With that thought, he felt more resolved than ever. He would become the #1 hero, and nothing would stand in his way. The evening sun cast a golden hue over the city as Izuku and his mother, Inko, made their way to the restaurant where they were meeting Kushina and her grandparents, Tsunade and Dan, for dinner. Izuku was excited but a bit nervous. He had told his mom all about the entrance exam and was looking forward to a relaxing evening with friends and family. As they arrived at the quaint, family-owned restaurant, they were greeted by Kushina and her grandparents, who were already seated at a cozy corner table. The restaurant had a warm, inviting atmosphere, with soft lighting and the delicious aroma of home-cooked meals wafting through the air. Midoriya, Mrs. Midoriya, over here. Kushina waved enthusiastically, a big smile on her face. Inko and Izuku made their way over to the table, exchanging greetings with everyone. Hello, Kushina. It's so nice to see you again, Inko said warmly, hugging the girl. Tsunade and Dan stood up to greet them as well. Welcome. It's a pleasure to see you two again, Tsunade said with a gracious smile. Dan nodded in agreement. It's been a while. Please have a seat. As they all settled down, the conversation quickly turned to the events of the day. Izuku's excitement was palpable as he recounted the entrance exam to Kushina, who listened intently, her eyes sparkling with interest. It sounds like you did amazing, Izuku, Kushina said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. I wish I could have been there to see it. Izuku smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. Thanks, Kushina. It was intense, but I think it went well. Inko, looking proud as ever, chimed in. I'm sure you did great, Izuku, and it's so nice to see you making new friends. Kushina blushed slightly and looked down at her plate. Yeah, Izuku's pretty great, she mumbled. Tsunade and Dan watched the interaction with amusement. It's good to see you kids supporting each other, Dan said, his voice gentle and kind. As they enjoyed their meal, the conversation flowed naturally. The food was delicious, a mix of traditional dishes that everyone enjoyed. They talked about everything from school to hobbies and even shared some funny stories from their past. At one point, Inko turned to Tsunade, curiosity evident in her eyes. Tsunade, I was wondering why Kushina didn't apply for the hero course. Izuku mentioned it, and I was a bit surprised. Tsunade smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting a touch of nostalgia. Kushina is very much like her mother. Her mother, Mido, was a hero known for her balance and wisdom. She believed in a well-rounded education. Kushina wanted to follow in her footsteps and gain a broader perspective before diving into the hero course. Kushina nodded. Yeah, I want to be a hero like my mom, but I also want to understand different aspects of society and education. I think it'll make me a better hero in the long run. Inko nodded, understanding and respect in her eyes. That's very wise. I'm sure you'll be an amazing hero, Kushina. Tsunade chuckled softly, a twinkle in her eye. It's funny, really. Sometimes I wonder how a blockhead like Hashirama managed to woo such a wise woman like our daughter. Everyone laughed, and Dan added, he did have had some impressive qualities, dear, and he was incredibly persistent. Kushina grinned. From what I remember, it was a little of both. The conversation flowed naturally as they enjoyed their meal. The food was delicious, a mix of traditional dishes that everyone enjoyed. They talked about everything from school to hobbies, and even shared some funny stories from their past. At one point, Tsunade turned to Inko. So, Mrs. Midoriya, how do you feel about Izuku's aspirations to become a hero? Inko smiled warmly, her eyes filled with love for her son. I'm incredibly proud of him. He's always been so determined and kind-hearted. I know he'll make a great hero one day. Izuku blushed, feeling a surge of gratitude for his mother's unwavering support. Thanks, Mom. Kushina grinned. I know he'll make a great hero, too. He's got the heart for it. As the dinner progressed, the atmosphere remained light and joyful. They laughed and shared stories, enjoying each other's company. It was a welcome respite from the stresses and challenges of their daily lives. Towards the end of the meal, Dan raised his glass. To new friendships and future heroes, he toasted, his voice filled with pride and hope. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the sentiment. To new friendships and future heroes. When the check came, Inko instinctively reached for it, but she immediately felt a heavy aura around her. Looking up, she saw Tsunade with a sweet smile on her face, but with glowing, determined eyes. Dear Inko, do you remember how past attempts at paying went? Tsunade asked sweetly, her tone gentle but leaving no room for argument. Inko chuckled nervously, retracting her hand. Oh, right. I suppose I do remember. Tsunade laughed lightly, her aura softening. Good. Dinner is on us. Consider it a celebration for the kids' hard work. After dinner, as they were preparing to leave, Kushina pulled Izuku aside. Hey, thanks for coming tonight. It was really fun. Izuku smiled. Yeah, it was. Thanks for inviting us. Kushina looked down for a moment before meeting his eyes again. You know, I'm really glad we're friends. I think we'll make a great team. Izuku felt his heart swell with happiness. Me too, Kushina. Me too. As they left the restaurant and headed home, Izuku felt a deep sense of contentment. He had faced the challenges of the entrance exam, made new friends, and enjoyed a wonderful evening with people who cared about him. He knew that the journey to becoming a hero would be tough, but with friends like Kushina and the support of his family, he felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The night sky was clear and full of stars as Izuku and Inko walked home, talking about the dinner and their plans for the future. It had been a perfect evening, and Izuku went to bed that night with a smile on his face, dreaming of the adventures that awaited him at UA High School. In a meeting room at UA High School later that day, Midnight was chuckling softly as she glanced over at Aizawa, who was staring at Nizu with a tired but stony expression. Nizu, unfazed, was calmly sipping his tea, while All Might watched the interaction with an awkward look on his face. Nizu finally set down his mug and addressed Aizawa with a calm voice. Aizawa, relax. Sometimes we don't get everything we want in life, and we have to adjust. All Might, sensing the tension, asked lightly, why is the SWCH up such a cause for concern? Present Mike chuckled and replied, well, it's not really, but Mr. Sunshine here is pretty used to getting his way. Midnight, still smiling but not really caring about the situation, said, I might have to introduce my friend you to Izuku. Her quirk works in the opposite of his. They would make an interesting team up for sure. Aizawa sighed and finally spoke. Nizu, I'll accept it, but I won't be happy about it. Nizu smiled reassuringly. That's fine, Aizawa, as long as you don't turn it against the students. Present Mike chimed in, his tone supportive. Aizawa might be picky, but he wouldn't do that. He's always had the students' best interests at heart. Aizawa's eyes widened slightly, clearly offended by the implication. I would never do that. The room fell into a brief, awkward silence as everyone processed the exchange. Kushina, Tsunade, and Dan were gathered in the living room of their cozy home. The warm light from the lamps cast a comforting glow on the room, creating an atmosphere of familial warmth and love. Laughter filled the air as they recounted the events of the day, particularly Izuku's animated descriptions of his encounters with the robots during the entrance exam. Can you imagine the support teacher's face when he saw the toy's zero-pointer? Kushina said, in excitement with wide eyes and expressive gestures. Tsunade chuckled, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Izuku reminds me of that fool, Hashirama, she said, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. Turning to Kushina, she teased, so, staking your claim on him already. Kushina blushed and lightly punched at Tsunade's arm, only for Tsunade to block it effortlessly with her palm. Grandma, she protested, her face turning a deeper shade of red. Tsunade laughed heartily. Oh, relax. I'm just teasing. But, Izuku's quirk allows for some different kinds of fun. Kushina's blush deepened even further as she stammered. We're going into high school. There's no time for things like that. Tsunade smirked, enjoying her granddaughter's embarrassment. Actually, high school is the best time for things like that. Dan sighed, giving Tsunade a gentle yet reproachful look. Tsunade, please, don't put ideas in the girl's head. Kushina, flustered and eager to escape the teasing, stood up abruptly. I'm going to bed, she announced quickly, making her way out of the room with a determined stride. As Kushina left, both Tsunade and Dan's expression softened, their laughter giving way to a more somber mood as they watched her retreating figure disappear down the hallway. Dan spoke softly, breaking the silence. Our granddaughter is coming back, thanks to that boy. Tsunade nodded, a gentle smile on her face. Yes, I'm just happy she's not kicking trees all day, every day like she used to. She's finally starting to open up and enjoy life again. And she is definitely a good influence on him. He has changed quite a bit since we met the boy. Dan smiled too, his eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and relief. Yes, it was a good decision to bring her here, I think. She's made friends, and she's finding her path. Izuku has been a good influence on her as well. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. The presence of Izuku had brought a new light into Kushina's life, and they both knew that his influence was helping her find a balance she hadn't had before. The future looked brighter, and for the first time in a long while, they felt hopeful about what lay ahead for their granddaughter. Tsunade broke the silence, her voice soft but filled with determination. We'll continue to support her in every way we can. With friends like Izuku, and with us by her side, she'll find her way. Dan nodded, his expression resolute. Absolutely. She's strong, just like her mother. And with time, she'll only grow stronger. The two grandparents shared a look of understanding and mutual resolve. They knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it together, supporting Kushina every step of the way. Later that night, Izuku was in his room, setting up some of the shrunken robots along the tiny obstacle course on his desk in the corner of the room. As he carefully placed each robot in its designated spot, a wide grin spread across his face. He was already imagining the reactions and the fun they would have with this new setup. Wait until Kushina sees this, he said aloud, his voice filled with excitement. She's going to have so much fun. Izuku paused for a moment, thinking about how much Kushina had impacted his life. She had pushed him to become stronger, to think more creatively about how he used his quirk, and to believe in himself more. And now, he had something special to share with her, a project they could both enjoy and learn from. He stepped back to admire his work, feeling a surge of pride and anticipation. The robots, though shrunken and harmless now, represented a challenge, a game, and a tool for growth all in one. He could already picture Kushina's competitive spirit kicking in, her eyes lighting up as they raced their tiny opponents through the course. She's going to love it, he murmured to himself, a sense of satisfaction settling over him. With everything in place, Izuku took one last look before turning off the desk lamp and heading to bed. He was eager for the next day, not just for the training and learning at UA, but for the joy of sharing this new adventure with his friend. As he lay in bed, his mind buzzed with ideas and possibilities, but most of all, with the simple happiness of having found such a good friend in Kushina. With a contented sigh, he drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever challenges and fun awaited him. A few days after the exams, Izuku invited Kushina over to his house. He was brimming with excitement about the obstacle course he had set up the other night and couldn't wait to share it with her. As they entered his room, he led her to the corner where his desk was transformed into a miniature battlefield. "Wow, Izuku, this looks amazing," Kushina exclaimed, her eyes wide with delight as she took in the intricate setup. "Did you make all of this yourself?" Izuku nodded, beaming with pride. "Yeah, I thought it would be fun for us to try out. I've added a few one-pointers, a couple of two-pointers, and a few three-pointers to the course. Just be careful not to destroy too many robots. We only have so many." Kushina grinned, her competitive spirit already kicking in. "All right, let's do this. How do we start?" Izuku explained the plan. "We're going to shrink down and navigate the course ourselves with the robots scattered throughout. It'll be a great way to test our reflexes and coordination. Ready?" Kushina nodded eagerly. "Ready." Izuku activated his quirk, and in an instant, both he and Kushina shrank down. The obstacle course now loomed large before them, a sprawling landscape of miniature ramps, barriers, and tiny robots. "Let's go," Izuku said, leading the way as they sprinted towards the first section of the course. The one-pointers were scattered around the initial stretch, moving predictably but requiring careful navigation. Kushina took the lead, her agility and reflexes allowing her to dodge and weave between the robots with ease. Izuku followed closely, his movements precise as he matched her pace. "You're pretty good at this, Kushina," Izuku said, focusing on keeping up. Kushina laughed. "Well, I've always had good reflexes. Plus, this is just the warm-up." As they navigated the course, one of the one-pointers suddenly turned and aimed a small laser at Kushina. She reacted quickly, dodging to the side and delivering a swift kick to the robot, causing it to tumble over without being destroyed. "Nice move," Izuku called out, ducking under a similar attack from another one-pointer. Next, they approached the two-pointers. These robots were slightly more challenging, with more complex movements and faster reactions. As they carefully navigated through a series of tight turns and narrow passageways, the two-pointers started firing small projectiles. Kushina and Izuku moved in sync, dodging the attacks and countering when necessary. Kushina performed a quick series of punches, knocking back a two-pointer that got too close, while Izuku used his shrinking ability to quickly maneuver around the robots, delivering precise strikes. As they tackled a series of ramps, Kushina's foot slipped on a steep incline, but she quickly regained her balance, narrowly avoiding a collision with the two-pointer. "Phew, that was close," she said, exhaling in relief. Izuku chuckled. "You're doing great. Just keep your focus." Finally, they reached the three-pointers, the most challenging robots in the obstacle course. These robots were faster and more unpredictable, requiring quick thinking and precise control. Kushina and Izuku took a deep breath, ready for the final test. They started simultaneously, their tiny figures darting forward with surprising speed. Kushina zigzagged through the obstacles, narrowly avoiding the barriers. Izuku was right behind, expertly navigating the course with practiced ease. Halfway through, Kushina encountered a particularly tricky section with multiple ramps and a narrow passage. She bit her lip, concentrating hard as she guided herself through the complex maneuvers. Meanwhile, Izuku managed to keep pace, deftly avoiding obstacles and staying on course. As they neared the end of the course, both faced a final challenge, a series of moving barriers guarded by the three-pointers. These robots launched small but fast-moving projectiles and tried to corner them. Kushina's eyes widened, but she quickly adapted, timing her movements perfectly to slip through the gaps. She delivered a spinning kick to a three-pointer, sending it reeling but still intact. Izuku followed suit, but a sudden movement of one of the barriers almost caused him to crash. With quick reflexes, he adjusted, guiding himself safely through the final stretch. He shrank down even further to dodge a projectile, then returned to his previous size to punch a three-pointer, sending it skidding across the course. They both reached the finish line at nearly the same time, coming to a halt just inches apart. That was intense, Kushina said, her face flushed with excitement. I can't believe how challenging those three-pointers were. Izuku nodded, a satisfied smile on his face. Yeah, they were tough, but we did it, and we didn't destroy any of the robots. Kushina laughed. Barely, but this was so much fun, Izuku. Thanks for setting this up. Izuku's smile widened. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I thought it would be a great way for us to practice our reflexes and coordination. Plus, it's just fun to do something different. Kushina nodded, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Definitely. We should do this more often. It's a great way to unwind and train at the same time. They spent the rest of the afternoon tweaking the obstacle course and experimenting with different challenges for the robots. As the sun began to set, they finally took a break, sitting back and admiring their handiwork. You're right, Izuku, Kushina said, looking at the miniature battlefield. This was a lot of fun, and it really helped me think about how to use my skills in different ways. Izuku nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment. I'm glad. And, it's not just about the training. It's about having fun and pushing ourselves to be better. I need to use the bathroom, Izuku said, stretching to his full height after they had grown back to normal size. I'll be right back. Kushina nodded, still catching her breath. Sure, take your time. As Izuku left the room, Kushina wandered over to his work desk, curious about the various papers and sketches scattered across it. She had always known Izuku to be meticulous and detail-oriented, but the sheer volume of drawings and notes caught her attention. One particular sketch caught her eye, and she picked it up for a closer look. It was a detailed drawing of a superhero costume, clearly designed with great care. The costume was reminiscent of an old comic book hero's suit, but with a distinctive green color scheme. The suit featured a sleek, armored design with a helmet that had a retractable faceplate. Integrated along the waist were several small capture jars, each designed to hold shrunken items or foes. The green color gave it a unique and striking appearance, blending practicality with style. Wow, this looks amazing, Kushina muttered to herself, impressed by the thought and effort Izuku had put into the design. She whistled softly, appreciating the craftsmanship. Her eyes then drifted to another drawing beneath the first one. Curious, she set the green costume sketch aside and picked up the second one. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she examined it. The second sketch depicted a female version of the costume, similar to an old female comic book hero's suit with mechanical wings and a striking red color. The suit had a streamlined design, featuring sleek, segmented armor that allowed for flexibility and protection. The mechanical wings were designed to fold neatly against the back when not in use, and the helmet included an advanced visor for enhanced vision. The red color made it bold and eye-catching, with accents that highlighted its high-tech features. Kushina's blush deepened as she realized the amount of effort Izuku had put into these designs. She admired the sleek lines and functional elements, but a part of her couldn't help but wonder about the measurements. Just then, the door opened, and Izuku walked back into the room. He froze in his tracks when he saw Kushina holding the sketch of the female costume. His eyes widened in horror as he thought, "Oh no, the blueprints." Kushina turned to face him, holding up the sketch of the female costume. Her eyes glowed, white with a dark aura surrounding her. She stared at Izuku, her expression a mix of curiosity and irritation. Kushina, Izuku stammered, raising his hands defensively. I thought it looked cool. Kushina took a step forward, her voice sickly sweet as she asked, "How did you get my measurements, Izuku?" Izuku gulped, feeling a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. He started to say, "Tsu," but didn't get a chance to finish as Kushina lunged at him, knocking him to the floor. She pinned him down, her face inches from his, her eyes still glowing. "Explain." "Now," she demanded, her voice firm. Okay. Izuku yelled, holding up his hands in surrender. "I'll explain. I got the measurements from Tsunade. She thought it would be a good idea for training exercises to see how accurate our designs could be if we were to make real hero suits." Kushina paused, her eyes still glowing, but with less intensity. She looked at him skeptically. "Really?" Izuku nodded frantically. "Yes, really. I promise. I wasn't trying to be creepy or anything." Kushina stared at him for a long moment before finally letting go and standing up. The dark aura around her dissipated, and her eyes returned to their normal color. "Fine," she said, still a bit miffed. "But next time, tell me before you go using my measurements for something like this." Izuku breathed a sigh of relief, nodding vigorously as he got to his feet. "Absolutely. I will. I promise." Kushina sighed, shaking her head as she placed the sketch back on the desk. "You're lucky you're my friend, Izuku." Izuku smiled sheepishly. "Yeah, I know. Thanks, Kushina." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't help but smile back. Despite the misunderstanding, their bond had grown a little stronger, and they both knew they would continue to face challenges together, both big and small. Izuku and Kushina decided to try out a training exercise while they were shrunk. They figured that in the future, they would be working together a lot, so it was a good idea to practice using their quirks in real-world situations. They chose a bustling market as the perfect place to test their skills. After arriving at the market, they found a quiet spot and activated Izuku's quirk. In an instant, they shrank down, the once familiar surroundings now towering over them. The ground seemed like a vast expanse, and the people walking around looked like colossal giants. "Ready?" Izuku asked, his voice filled with excitement. Kushina nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Let's do this." They began to navigate through the maze of giant feet, carefully dodging the massive shoes of the shoppers. The ground trembled with each step of the people above, making the experience both thrilling and a bit daunting. "This is incredible," Kushina said, her voice barely audible over the noise of the market. "It's like a whole new world down here." Izuku grinned. "Yeah, it's amazing. Just be careful not to get stepped on." As they continued their miniature adventure, they found themselves hiding behind a giant market stall to avoid being seen. It was then that something unexpected happened. A large ant slowly approached them, its antennae twitching inquisitively. Kushina, taken by surprise, jumped back in alarm. "Whoa, that thing is huge," she exclaimed, quickly fixing her posture. Izuku, however, seemed more curious than frightened. The ant approached him, gently poking him with its antennae. To Kushina's surprise, Izuku started to giggle. "What's going on?" Kushina asked, bewildered. "I can't hear anything." Izuku chuckled, still being poked by the ant. "It's not talking exactly. I think I can understand its pheromones or something. It's like I can sense what it's thinking. It's asking if we're food." Kushina stared at him, wide-eyed. "Seriously? That's crazy." Izuku nodded. "Yeah, it's pretty wild. I told it we're not food and apologized for not knowing where it can find some for its queen." The ant poked him a few more times, seemingly satisfied with his response, and then turned to walk away. Izuku waved after it. "Goodbye and good luck." Kushina looked at him with an odd expression. "Did you really just talk to an ant?" Izuku shrugged, a look of confusion on his face. "I guess I did. I'll have to look into this more later. Maybe it's another aspect of my quirk." They both shared a moment of bewildered silence, trying to process what had just happened. "Well, that was interesting," Kushina finally said. Izuku nodded in agreement. "Definitely not what I expected for today's training." Kushina laughed. "Yeah, but let's not tell Inko or my grandparents about this training idea. They'd probably freak out. Izuku grinned. Agreed. This stays between us. Despite the strange encounter, they continued their training exercise, weaving through the market, avoiding the giant feet, and practicing their coordination. The experience not only helped them sharpen their skills, but also brought them closer as friends. By the time they returned to their normal size, they were both filled with a sense of accomplishment and excitement for the future. As they walked back home, Kushina glanced at Izuku. You know, for a guy who talks to ants, you're pretty cool. Izuku laughed, feeling a warm sense of camaraderie. Thanks, Kushina. You're not so bad yourself. They both smiled, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The future was full of possibilities, and they were ready to take them on, one step at a time. The next morning, Izuku awoke with a sense of nervous anticipation. Today was the day he would find out if he had been accepted into UA high school. He had worked so hard, and everything hinged on this moment. He sat at the breakfast table, trying to eat, but his stomach was too knotted with nerves to take more than a few bites. When the mail finally arrived, Izuku practically leaped out of his seat and rushed to the door. His hands trembled as he sifted through the envelopes until he found it, a large, official-looking envelope from UA High School. "Mom, it's here," he shouted, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. His mother, Inko, hurried over, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Open it, Izuku." With shaking hands, Izuku tore open the envelope. A small device fell out, and with a click, a hologram of All Might appeared, larger than life and full of energy. "Greetings, young Izuku Midoriya." All Might's booming voice filled the room. "I am here with the results of your entrance exam." Izuku's heart pounded in his chest as he listened intently. "You showed incredible potential during the exam," All Might continued. "Not only did you score high in the combat portion, but you also demonstrated the true spirit of a hero through your actions. Thanks to the secret points awarded for rescue efforts, I am pleased to inform you that you came in first place." Izuku's eyes widened in shock. "First place?" he whispered, hardly daring to believe it. The hologram shifted to show a familiar face, Tenya Ida, the blue-haired boy from the exam. "I know how unorthodox this request is," Ida began, "but this other student, I seem to have forgotten his name, but his quirk allows him to shrink. Anyways, he inspired me to act to save that girl. So if possible, please take some of my points to give to him and let him know that I, Ida Tenya, will forever remember the lesson he taught me, that saving lives is more important than my own situation. So thank you." The hologram shifted back to All Might. "Part of being a hero is inspiring others to act. You, Izuku Midoriya, have shown that you possess the heart of a true hero. I am more than happy to welcome you to my hero academia." Tears streamed down Izuku's face as he listened to All Might's words. Inko, too, was crying, her emotions overwhelming her. She hugged Izuku tightly, her tears soaking into his shirt. "I'm so proud of you, Izuku," Inko sobbed, kissing his face repeatedly. "I knew you could do it. I always knew you had it in you." Izuku hugged his mother back, feeling a mix of joy, relief, and overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you, Mom. I couldn't have done it without your support." Meanwhile, an almost identical scene was unfolding at Kushina's house. She had received her letter from you, high school, and eagerly opened it with her grandparents, Tsunade and Dan, by her side. Kushina's face lit up with a bright smile as she read the letter. "I got in," she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement and pride. Tsunade and Dan immediately enveloped her in a warm embrace, hugging her from both sides. "This is just the beginning of your journey," Tsunade said, her voice full of emotion. "We are so proud of you, Kushina." Dan nodded, his eyes moist with tears of pride. "You've worked so hard, and now it's paying off. We knew you could do it." Kushina felt a rush of happiness and determination. "Thank you both. I couldn't have done it without you." As both families celebrated, the future heroes of UA High School were filled with hope and excitement for the journey ahead. They knew the road would be challenging, but with the support of their loved ones and the strength they had discovered within themselves, They were ready to face whatever came their way. The scene ended with Izuku and Kushina, each surrounded by their supportive families, feeling more determined than ever to become the heroes they aspired to be. The next chapter of their lives was just beginning, and they were ready to embrace it with open hearts and unwavering resolve. Kushina and Izuku stood at the front gates of UA High School, their hearts pounding with excitement and anticipation. The iconic gates, with the UA emblem prominently displayed, loomed large before them, symbolizing the beginning of their dreams. They shared a look, their eyes shining with determination and hope. "Can you believe we're finally here?" Izuku said, his voice filled with awe. "UA High School?" Kushina nodded, her smile mirroring his. "Yeah, it's surreal. All our hard work led us to this moment." As they took a step forward, ready to embark on their new journey, a familiar figure barged between them, shoving them aside. Katsuki Bakugo stormed past, his usual scowl etched on his face. He took a few steps before stopping and turning his head slightly. "Don't know what you nerds are excited about," Katsuki sneered. "Everyone in there is nothing but extras." With that, he continued walking, his stride full of confidence and arrogance. Kushina and Izuku exchanged a glance, both momentarily taken aback by Katsuki's brusque behavior. But then, as if on cue, they both burst into laughter, the tension melting away in an instant. "He hasn't changed a bit," Kushina said between giggles. Izuku nodded, wiping a tear of laughter from his eye. "Nope, still the same old Kakin." Their laughter echoed around them, drawing a few curious glances from other students entering the gates. But neither Kushina nor Izuku cared. They were too wrapped up in the joy of the moment, the thrill of finally being at UA High School. As their laughter subsided, they took a deep breath, soaking in the atmosphere and the significance of the day. This was the beginning of something incredible, the first step on their journey to becoming heroes. "Ready?" Izuku asked, his voice steady and filled with determination. Kushina nodded, her eyes shining with resolve. "Ready." They stepped forward together, side by side, walking through the gates of UA High School. The path ahead was uncertain and full of challenges, but they knew they had each other's backs. With every step, they felt a surge of excitement and purpose, ready to face whatever lay ahead. This was just the beginning, and they were more than ready to embrace it. As they crossed the threshold, their hearts swelled with anticipation for the journey that awaited them, knowing that they were one step closer to realizing their dreams. The morning sun cast a warm glow over UA High School, illuminating the vast campus with a sense of promise and excitement. Kushina and Izuku stood at the gates, taking a moment to soak in the reality of their dreams coming true. The towering buildings and bustling students filled them with a mix of awe and anticipation. "We're really here," Kushina said, her voice filled with wonder. Izuku nodded, a broad smile on his face. "Yeah, we made it." As they walked through the gates, the sounds of students chatting and the rustling of leaves filled the air. The atmosphere was charged with the energy of new beginnings. They shared a quick hug before parting ways, each heading to their respective classes. "I'll see you later," Kushina said, waving as she headed towards the Gen Ed building. "Good luck," Izuku called after her, turning to find the door to Class 1A. Navigating the labyrinthine hallways of UA, Izuku marveled at the school's grandeur. The walls were adorned with portraits of legendary heroes, and the corridors buzzed with the excitement of students eager to start their journey. He finally found the door marked 1A and took a deep breath before stepping inside. The classroom was already abuzz with activity. At the front, a tall, stern-looking student with glasses was badgering a blonde-haired boy who was leaning back with his feet propped on his desk. "You should show proper etiquette in the classroom," the glasses-wearing student insisted, his tone rigid and authoritative. The blonde-haired boy smirked, barely lifting his head. "Name's Nito Monoma." "And who are you, Mr. Rulebook?" "I am Tenya Ida," the glasses-wearing student replied, straightening his posture. "And as your classmate, I expect you to respect the decorum of our prestigious institution." Before Nito could retort, the classroom door creaked open, and Izuku entered. Ida's stern expression softened as he recognized Izuku, and he approached with a welcoming smile. "Izuku Midoriya, correct," Ida said, extending his hand. "I wanted to thank you for inspiring me during the entrance exam." Izuku shook his hand, feeling a rush of gratitude. "Thank you, Ida. I'm glad I could help." As they spoke, Ochako Uraraka approached from the side, her eyes bright with excitement. "Hey, Izuku. Ida, I just wanted to say thank you both for helping me during the test. Let's be friends." Izuku and Ida both smiled, nodding in agreement. "Of course, Ochako," Izuku said. "Let's do our best together." The classroom buzzed with chatter as more students joined the conversation, introducing themselves and sharing their excitement. The atmosphere was lively and full of anticipation. Suddenly, the door at the front of the room opened, and a man in a yellow sleeping bag wiggled his way inside, making his way to the teacher's desk. The students fell silent, watching in confusion and curiosity. Izuku immediately recognized the man and sat still, waiting for the class to calm down. The man unzipped the sleeping bag, revealing a disheveled figure with tired eyes. "You're late," he said, his voice flat and unimpressed. "I'm disappointed." The class fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. "My name is Shota Aizawa," he continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "If he came to you, for fun and games, you might as well leave now." Aizawa's stern demeanor sent a shiver through the students. They realized that this was not going to be an ordinary school experience. "We're going to start with a field test," Aizawa announced. "Get changed into your gym uniforms and meet me at the assessment area outside." The students exchanged nervous glances before quickly gathering their things and heading to the locker rooms. Izuku felt a mix of excitement and apprehension, knowing that this was just the beginning of their journey at UA. As they left the classroom, he glanced back at the daunting figure of Aizawa, feeling a surge of determination. This was what he had worked so hard for, and he was ready to prove himself. Kushina walked into her classroom, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The room was filled with lively students, their conversations creating a cacophony of voices that bounced off the walls. It was an environment that Kushina wasn't particularly comfortable with, but she reminded herself of the progress she had made with Izuku's unwitting help. His friendship had given her the strength to face situations that once seemed daunting. Taking a deep breath, she made her way to an empty seat near the back of the room. The students around her were animated, their faces alight with the thrill of starting a new chapter at UA high school. Kushina tried to tune out the noise, focusing instead on the determination that had brought her here. "Hey there," a cheerful voice interrupted her thoughts. Kushina looked up to see a couple of students approaching her desk. One was a girl with bright green hair, tied in pigtails, and the other was a boy with glasses and a friendly smile. "Hi, I'm Yuki Tanaka." The girl introduced herself, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "And this is Hiroshi Sato." Hiroshi gave a friendly nod. "Nice to meet you. What's your name?" Kushina nodded back, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Kushina Nakamura." "Nice to meet you, Kushina," Yuki said with a grin. "So what's your quirk?" Kushina hesitated for a moment before replying. "I'm quirkless, actually, but I'm pretty good at martial arts." Hiroshi's eyes widened in admiration. "That's impressive. Quirkless but still kicking butt. Respect." They chatted for a few minutes, the initial awkwardness slowly melting away. Kushina found herself relaxing, thanks in no small part to Yuki and Hiroshi's genuine interest and easygoing nature. Their enthusiasm was contagious, and she started to feel a bit more at ease. As the conversation continued, Kushina noticed a boy with blue hair sitting in the corner of the room, brooding. His expression was one of intense focus and irritation, as if he was deep in thought and not particularly thrilled to be there. "Who's that?" Kushina asked, nodding towards the blue-haired boy. Yuki glanced over and shrugged. "Oh, that's Hitoshi Shinso. He's kind of a loner. Doesn't talk much." Kushina observed him for a moment longer, feeling a sense of curiosity. There was something about his demeanor that intrigued her, but she decided to let it go for now and focus on her new friends. Just as the conversation was picking up, the door to the classroom opened, and the room fell silent. Midnight, the R-rated hero, sauntered in casually, her presence commanding immediate attention. She wore her signature outfit and exuded an air of confidence and charisma that instantly captivated the students. "Good morning, class." Midnight began, her voice smooth and engaging. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Midnight. Welcome to UA High School." Kushina straightened in her seat, her interest piqued. She knew about Midnight and her unique teaching style, and she couldn't help but think that this would make for an interesting and unconventional learning experience. Midnight's gaze swept across the room, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You're here to become the best, and I'm here to help you achieve that. We're going to have a lot of fun, but make no mistake, this will be challenging." Kushina felt a surge of determination. Midnight's words resonated with her, reminding her why she had chosen this path despite the challenges. She glanced around the room, noticing the varied expressions on her classmates' faces, some excited, some nervous, but all filled with a sense of purpose. As Midnight continued to introduce herself and outline what to expect from the course, Kushina felt a sense of resolve solidifying within her. She might not have a quirk, but she had her own strengths and a determination to succeed. With friends like Izuku supporting her and new acquaintances like Yuki and Hiroshi, she felt ready to tackle whatever came her way. Midnight concluded her introduction with a playful wink. "Get ready, because this is just the beginning. Let's make it unforgettable." Kushina nodded to herself, feeling a small smile tug at her lips. She was ready. This was her journey, and she was going to make the most of it. Katsuki Bakugo strode confidently into Class 1B, his usual scowl replaced with a rare smile. As he scanned the room, he quickly noted Izuku's absence. His grin widened as he thought about the implications. "Perfect," he muttered to himself, making his way to an empty seat near the back. He dropped into the chair, leaning back and resting his feet on the desk. The familiar sense of superiority washed over him. Without Izuku around, he could focus on his own progress and strategies without the distraction of the nerd constantly trying to prove himself. He chuckled softly, imagining the next time they would compete. "I'm going to blow that nerd's socks off." Katsuki glanced around the classroom, sizing up his new classmates. He noted a few faces that seemed to stand out, some with interesting quirks and others with a determined look in their eyes. He made mental notes of who might be worth paying attention to and who would likely be easy to surpass. "This class is going to be better than 1A, he thought, his grin returning. "We'll steal the spotlight right from under them." His eyes gleamed with ambition and confidence. He was ready to dominate this new environment and show everyone why he was the best. Just then, the classroom door opened, and a tall, imposing figure stepped inside. The students fell silent as the man made his way to the front of the room. He had a rugged appearance and an air of authority that commanded immediate respect. "Welcome to Class 1B, the teacher began, his voice deep and powerful. "I am Vlad King, your homeroom teacher. Today marks the beginning of your journey to becoming professional heroes." Katsuki's smile grew as he listened. He could already feel the competitive energy in the room, and he thrived on it. This was exactly the kind of environment where he would excel. Vlad King continued, outlining the rigorous training and challenges that lay ahead. He emphasized the importance of hard work, DSBLN, and teamwork, qualities that Katsuki believed he already possessed in abundance. "Get ready to push yourselves beyond your limits," Vlad King concluded. "Your journey starts now." As the teacher's words sank in, Katsuki felt a surge of excitement and determination. This was his chance to shine, to prove once and for all that he was the best. He would take Class 1B to new heights and ensure that they outshone Class 1A in every possible way. Leaning back in his chair, Katsuki couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. This was the start of something great, and he was ready to make his mark. The sun was high in the sky as Class 1A entered the training area, its warmth a stark contrast to the nervous energy buzzing among the students. The open field was equipped with various testing stations, each designed to measure different aspects of physical prowess. The anticipation was palpable as the students looked around, taking in the sight of the equipment and wondering what challenges lay ahead. Izawa stood before them, his expression as unreadable as ever. Today, we will be doing what's called the quirk assessment test. We will be completing the same physical test you performed in middle school, he began, his voice steady and authoritative. However, there will be one major difference. The students listened intently, their eyes fixed on Izawa. He paused, looking directly at Izuku. Midoriya, you will go first, Izawa stated, motioning toward the circle marked on the ground with a ball inside it. Pick up the ball in the circle. Izuku felt a jolt of nerves but stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He picked up the ball, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. Izawa's gaze remained steady. What was your ball toss record in middle school? Izawa asked. 37 meters, Izuku replied, his voice a little shaky. Izawa nodded. Now, throw the ball as hard as you can. Use your quirk. As long as you stay in the circle, you can do as you like. Izuku blinked in confusion, clutching the ball handle a few times as he processed the instructions. The possibilities raced through his mind. He needed to make this count. Taking a deep breath, he activated his quirk and shrank down with the ball in hand. He leaped into the air, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. As he reached the peak of his jump, he threw the ball with all his strength. In that crucial moment, he grew the ball back to its original size, pouring every ounce of power he had into the throw. A couple keen-eyed students noticed the ball grow slightly larger than it was previously as it left Izuku's hand, but Izuku and most of them were focused on the sheer force behind the throw. The ball soared through the air, cutting a path across the sky. Izuku landed back in the circle, his heart racing, as he watched the ball's trajectory. Izawa's voice broke through the stunned silence. 25 meters. Izuku's eyes widened in shock, and the class erupted in excitement. That's amazing, one student exclaimed. Did you see how far that went? Another added. Using our quirks for this is going to be awesome, someone else shouted. The students buzzed with anticipation, thrilled at the prospect of using their quirks for the tests. Their excitement was palpable, the atmosphere charged with energy and enthusiasm. Izawa, however, quickly interrupted their celebrations with a stern scoff. This isn't a game, he said, his eyes narrowing as he looked at each student. Since you seem to have that idea, let me make something clear. The one who comes in last will be automatically expelled from you, effective immediately. The weight of his words hit the students like a punch to the gut. The excitement drained from their faces, replaced by a mixture of determination and fear. This was no ordinary school, and the stakes were higher than any of them had anticipated. Izuku felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. His performance had set the bar high, but the pressure on his classmates, and on himself, was intense. He glanced around at his peers, seeing their resolve harden in response to Izawa's ultimatum. This was just the beginning of their journey at high, and they were already learning that the path to becoming a hero was fraught with challenges and high expectations. Izuku took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. As Kushina's class made its way to orientation, she found herself caught up in the energy and excitement of the new school year. The hallways of high were bustling with students, all eager to begin their journey. Amidst the chatter and movement, Kushina's keen eyes spotted Hitoshi Shinso walking with a noticeable slump, an air of depression and anger hanging over him like a dark cloud. Before meeting Izuku, she might have ignored someone like Shinso, preferring to avoid the potential awkwardness of approaching a stranger. But now, she felt a newfound confidence and compassion, partly inspired by Izuku's unwavering kindness and determination. Taking a deep breath, she quickened her pace to catch up with him. "Hey there," she said lightly, offering a friendly smile. "I'm Kushina." Shinso glanced over at her, a look of mild surprise crossing his face. His purple eyes were wary, but he responded with a slight nod. Shinso, he said, his voice gruff. Kushina could sense the walls he had built around himself, a defense mechanism against the world. She remembered feeling similarly isolated before finding her way. Determined to reach out, she continued, "We'll be friends in the future." Shinso raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by her straightforwardness. "What makes you say that?" Kushina shrugged, her smile unwavering. "Just a feeling. You seem like someone worth getting to know." With that, she walked ahead, leaving Shinso standing there, momentarily stunned. He watched her go, a mix of curiosity and confusion flickering in his eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had approached him so openly, without judgment or fear. As Kushina rejoined her classmates, she felt a sense of satisfaction. She knew it might take time, but she was confident that her small gesture of kindness could make a difference. Shinso might not realize it yet, but she was determined to be a friend and ally, just as Izuku had been for her. The orientation room was buzzing with excitement as Kushina took her seat among her classmates. Midnight stood at the front, her presence commanding immediate attention. She welcomed the students with her usual flair, outlining the journey ahead and the challenges they would face. Kushina listened intently, her thoughts occasionally drifting back to Shinso. She was eager to learn more about him and help him break free from whatever shadows were clouding his heart. High was a place for growth, and she was determined to make the most of it, not just for herself but for those around her. As the orientation continued, Kushina felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than just a school. It was a place where she could forge bonds, grow stronger, and help others do the same. She was ready to face whatever challenges came her way, and she knew she wasn't alone in this journey. The sun blazed overhead as Class 1A gathered around the training area, the intensity of Aizawa's ultimatum still fresh in their minds. The students were buzzing with a mix of excitement and anxiety, ready to prove their worth in the upcoming physical tests. Izuku stood among them, mentally preparing himself for the challenges ahead. Aizawa called out the first event, the 50-meter dash. The students lined up, each determined to give it their all. Izuku found himself next to Nito Monoma, who wore a confident smirk. "Ready to lose, Midoriya?" Nito taunted. Izuku nodded, his determination unwavering. As the signal to start blared, he activated his quirk, shrinking down to a fraction of his size. With his smaller, more powerful form, he dashed forward, his tiny legs moving at incredible speed. Halfway through the dash, he grew back to his normal size, using the momentum to propel himself forward even faster. Nito, who had copied Tenya Ida's quirk, shot forward with bursts of speed, his legs moving like engines. They crossed the finish line almost simultaneously, the crowd erupting in cheers and gasps. "Impressive," Nito admitted, albeit grudgingly. Izuku smiled, his heart racing with the thrill of competition. Next up was the grip strength test. Izuku faced off against Mizo Shoji and Fumikage Tokoyami. Shoji's multiple arms and Tokoyami's dark shadow provided formidable competition. Izuku, thinking quickly, shrank himself down and used the increased density and strength of his tiny form to grip the device with all his might. He could feel the metal bending slightly under his grasp, the numbers on the display climbing higher and higher. When the results were announced, Izuku had scored just below Shoji, who took the lead with his incredible arm strength. Tokoyami's dark shadow gave a good fight, but Izuku's creative use of his quirk had kept him in close competition. The standing long jump followed. The sandpit gleamed in the sunlight as the students prepared for their jumps. Izuku watched as Tsu Ajui gracefully leaped forward, her frog-like abilities propelling her far. When it was Izuku's turn, he decided to try something bold. He shrank himself down and sprinted toward the edge of the platform. Just as he leaped, he grew back to his normal size, using the change in momentum to catapult himself even further. He soared through the air, landing with a thud near the far end of the sandpit. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Izuku's innovative use of his quirk had earned him one of the top spots in the event. The ball throw, where Izuku had already set a high standard, saw him competing against Nito once more, who had now copied Ochako Uraraka's zero-gravity quirk. Nito threw the ball with ease, sending it flying out of sight. Izuku, determined to outdo himself, repeated his earlier strategy. He shrank with the ball, jumped, and threw it with all his might while growing it back to size. The ball soared even further this time, but the real surprise was Nito's throw, which disappeared into the sky, thanks to the zero-gravity effect. Momoyozu watched carefully, noticing the ball seemed to grow slightly larger than its normal size just before it left Izuku's hand for a second time. She made a mental note to mention it to him later, thinking he might not have realized what happened in the heat of the moment. Not bad, Izuku admitted, impressed by Nito's resourcefulness. The final event was the endurance run. The students lined up, ready for the grueling test of stamina. Izuku found himself competing alongside Ochako, Tenya Ida, and Nito, who had used Ida's quirk once again. As the signal to start echoed, Izuku shrank down and began running, his smaller form allowing him to conserve energy while maintaining speed. He would periodically grow back to normal size to gain bursts of speed, creating an efficient rhythm that kept him ahead of most competitors. Ida's quirk allowed Nito to keep pace, while Ochako used her quirk to lighten herself, making her strides more effortless. The competition was fierce, but Izuku's strategic use of his quirk gave him the edge he needed. As they neared the finish line, Izuku pushed himself harder, growing back to full size for a final sprint. He crossed the line just ahead of Nito, with Ochako and Ida close behind. Breathless but exhilarated, Izuku felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced formidable opponents and used his quirk in creative, strategic ways to stay competitive. Aizawa gathered the students, his expression as inscrutable as ever. "Well done," he said, his tone grudgingly approving. "You've shown that you can adapt and use your quirks creatively. Remember, this is just the beginning." Izuku looked around at his classmates, seeing the determination and resolve in their eyes. This was the first step on their journey to becoming heroes, and he knew that with hard work and perseverance, they could overcome any challenge. The support department at UA High was a hive of activity, with students and teachers bustling about, examining designs, and working on various projects. The room was filled with the sounds of machinery, the hum of 3D printers, and the clinking of metal tools. Posters of past creations adorned the walls, and the air was thick with the scent of innovation and creativity. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Mei Hatsum stood out. Her bright pink hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her goggles perched atop her head, giving her a slightly mad scientist look. Mei's eyes sparkled with excitement as she sifted through a stack of hero costume designs on her workbench. "Let's see who we have here," Mei muttered to herself, picking up a design sheet. Her eyes widened with glee as she read the details. Midoriya, Izuku quirk, shrink. A giggle escaped her lips as she looked over the design more closely. The costume was inspired by Ant-Man's suit, but in a distinctive green color scheme. It featured sleek, armored sections and a helmet with a retractable faceplate. Integrated along the waist were several small capture jars, each designed to hold shrunken items or foes. "Shrink boy, huh?" Mei said out loud, her giggle turning into a full-blown laugh. "This is going to be so much fun." Her eyes then drifted to a toy-sized zero-pointer robot sitting on the table, a remnant from the entrance exam that had found its way into the support department. The sight of the tiny robot, combined with the concept of Midoriya's quirk, sent a rush of ideas through her inventive mind. She clapped her hands together, her excitement palpable. "Oh, this is perfect. I'll get to make some real fun babies for Midoriya." Mei's mind raced with possibilities, envisioning all the gadgets and enhancements she could create for Izuku's hero costume. She saw opportunities to incorporate shrinking and expanding mechanisms, capture devices, and even miniaturized combat tools. Her laughter took on a slightly maniacal edge as she grabbed a notepad and began sketching ideas. "Let's see mini traps, grappling hooks, maybe even a jetpack that can shrink and expand. Oh, The possibilities are endless. Suddenly, another idea struck her, and her eyes lit up even more. What if I could design a gun that harnesses his quirk's energy? It could shrink foes and capture them at the same time. Her mind buzzed with excitement as she imagined the device. It would be sleek and multifunctional, with a design that allowed Izuku to use his shrinking ability at range. The gun would not only shrink the targets, but also contain them in specialized capture jars attached to his belt. "This is brilliant," May exclaimed, her voice filled with glee. "Imagine how effective that would be in battle. Midoriya will be able to shrink his enemies and capture them effortlessly." Other students in the support department glanced over, some with amusement and others with mild concern. They were used to May's eccentric outbursts, but today she seemed particularly animated. "Hey May," one of the students called out, "what's got you so excited?" May turned to them, her eyes wide with enthusiasm. "I'm working on a costume for a hero student with a shrinking quirk, and I just thought of an amazing new gadget for him. A gun that shrinks and captures enemies. Can you imagine the babies I can make? This is going to be amazing." She pointed to the toy-sized zero-pointer robot. "And this little guy gave me some great ideas. Imagine shrinking enemies or objects and then capturing them with ease. The tactical advantages are incredible." The student nodded, intrigued. "Sounds like a lot of fun, May. Just don't blow anything up, okay?" May waved them off with a grin. "Oh, don't worry. I know exactly what I'm doing." Turning back to her workbench, May continued to sketch and jot down notes, her mind abuzz with creativity. She was in her element, surrounded by tools and materials, ready to bring her visions to life. The thought of helping a future hero, like Izuku, only fueled her excitement. As she worked, May couldn't help but imagine the look on Midoriya's face when he saw the final product. She wanted to create something that not only suited his quirk, but also pushed the boundaries of what a hero costume could be. "This is going to be the best baby I've ever made," May said to herself, her voice filled with determination. Midoriya won't know what hit him. With renewed focus, she dove into her work, her hands moving swiftly as she brought her ideas to life. The support department buzzed with activity, and in the midst of it all, May Hatsum worked tirelessly, driven by her passion for creation and innovation. Aizawa stood at the front of the classroom, his expression as unreadable as ever. The students of Class 1A were seated, their attention focused on their homeroom teacher. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was anxious to hear the results of the quirk assessment they had completed earlier. Aizawa cleared his throat, the sound commanding immediate silence. "I have the results of your quirk assessments. I will display the list for you to see where you stand." He pressed a button on his remote, and the projector screen behind him lit up, revealing the rankings. 1. Momo Yarozu 100 points. 2. Shoto Todoroki 98 points. 3. Nido Monoma 95 points. 4. Izuku Midoriya 92 points. 5. Tenya Ida 90 points. 6. Fumikage Tokoyami 88 points. 7. Mizo Shoji 85 points. 8. Tsuyu Azui 83 points. 9. Ochako Uraraka 80 points. 10. Ijiro Kirishima 78 points. 11. Mina Ishido 75 points. 12. Denki Kaminari 73 points. 13. Kyokujiro 70 points. 14. Hantasiro 68 points. 15. Yuga Aoyama 65 points. 16. Rikido Sato 63 points. 17. Koji Koda 60 points. 18. Toru Hagakure 58 points. 19. Minoru Mineta 55 points. Izuku looked at his score, feeling a mixture of pride and determination. Fourth place was impressive, but he knew he had to work harder to improve. He glanced around at his classmates, noting their reactions. Most seemed relieved or motivated, but Minoru Mineta was an exception. Mineta's eyes widened in horror as he saw his name at the bottom of the list. "No, this can't be happening. I'm going to be expelled before I even get a girlfriend," he wailed, his voice rising in pitch. Aizawa's stern gaze silenced the room. "Calm down, Mineta. The expulsion threat was a lie to get you all to give your best effort." Mineta froze, his expression shifting from panic to disbelief. Eli. Momo Yorozu, sitting primly at her desk, nodded knowingly. I suspected it was a lie from the start. Aizawa continued, his tone serious. Being a hero isn't a game, and it's not for the faint of heart. You need to be prepared to face real challenges, and sometimes that means pushing yourself beyond what you think you're capable of. The room fell silent, the weight of Aizawa's words sinking in. He looked at each of them, making sure they understood the gravity of his message. Now, you're dismissed for the day. The students rose from their seats, murmuring among themselves as they made their way to the locker rooms to change back into their regular clothes. As the day wound down and the students headed home, Momo found herself lost in thought. She had meant to speak with Izuku about the peculiar observation she made during the ball throw, but had been too caught up in the moment. As she walked home, the memory resurfaced, and she felt a sense of urgency. I need to talk to Midoriya about that, she resolved, determined to bring it up the next day. It could be important. The following day would bring new opportunities and challenges, but Momo was focused on her goal. She knew that understanding and mastering their quirks was vital for their development as heroes, and she was eager to help her classmates in any way she could. Katsuki Bakugo left high after the first day, his heart pounding with exhilaration. The first day had been everything he hoped for, challenging, intense, and filled with opportunities to prove himself. He walked with a confident stride, his mind buzzing with thoughts of what lay ahead. This is going to be awesome, Katsuki muttered to himself, a fierce grin spreading across his face. I'm going to crush every challenge they throw at me. The excitement of the day, still fresh in his mind, he thought about the upcoming trials, the fierce competition, and the chance to showcase his skills. He relished the idea of standing out, of being recognized as the best among his peers. But as he walked, his mind drifted to his old friends from middle school, the ones he had always dominated in every aspect. He hadn't heard from them since getting into UA, and a nagging thought crept into his mind. Were they so jealous that they refused to speak with him anymore? He remembered the times they would hang out, how they would look up to him, always acknowledging his strength and skill. He had expected them to be proud of his achievements, to celebrate with him. Instead, there was silence. Those idiots, Katsuki growled, his fists clenching at his sides. They should be celebrating my success, not sulking in jealousy. He shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away. It didn't matter. They weren't important. What mattered now was proving himself at UA, becoming the #1 hero, and showing everyone just how great he was. Forget them, he muttered, his voice filled with determination. I don't need them. I've got bigger things to focus on. As he continued walking home, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Katsuki's mind refocused on the challenges ahead, his resolve hardening with each step. He had no time for distractions or doubts. He was going to be the best, no matter what it took. With a final, resolute shake of his head, Katsuki banished the lingering thoughts of his old friends. His path was clear, and nothing would stand in his way. He would show everyone at UA what it meant to be a true hero, and, in the process, leave no room for anyone to doubt his greatness. The Midoriya household was filled with the delicious scent of vanilla and chocolate, wafting from the kitchen where an extraordinary sight awaited. On the kitchen table, a bowl of ice cream sat, its creamy peaks topped with cherries, chocolate syrup, and sprinkles, glinting under the kitchen lights. Above it, a toy diving board had been set up, just the right size for 2 shrunken heroes in training. In the living room, Inko Midoriya sat on the couch, a warm smile on her face as she watched the scene unfold. She giggled softly, delighted by the sight of her son and his friend having so much fun. On the diving board, Kushina stood beside Izuku, both of them dressed in miniature swimming gear. Kushina was staring at Izuku with a look of mixed disbelief and amusement, a light blush coloring her cheeks. I can't believe you convinced me to do this, she said, shaking her head slightly. Izuku's eyes sparkled with excitement, a huge smile spreading across his face. Come on, Kushina, this is going to be a lot of fun. Think of it as a celebration for getting into UA High. We deserve a treat after all our hard work. Kushina glanced down from the edge of the diving board, her eyes widening as she took in the view below. The giant bowl of ice cream, larger than life from their perspective, looked incredibly inviting. All right, she conceded, her smile widening. Let's do this. Izuku stepped to the edge of the diving board, extending his hand to her. We'll dive off together, he said, his enthusiasm infectious. Kushina took his hand, and together they walked to the very tip of the diving board. They looked down at the giant bowl of ice cream, their hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and anticipation. Ready? Izuku asked, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. Kushina nodded, a mischievous glint in her eye. Ready. But just as they were about to jump, Kushina smirked and gave Izuku a playful shove. Oops, she said with mock innocence. Izuku yelped in surprise as he lost his balance and tumbled off the diving board, falling towards the creamy depths below. Kushina watched him for a moment, laughter bubbling up inside her, before diving in after him with a graceful leap. The world seemed to slow down as they fell, the anticipation building. The cold air rushed past them, and then, with a soft, satisfying plop, they landed in the giant bowl of ice cream. The sensation was both shocking and delightful, the cold treat enveloping them in a sweet embrace. Izuku surfaced first, his face smeared with vanilla and chocolate. He laughed, wiping the ice cream from his eyes. This is amazing. Kushina emerged beside him, her hair dripping with melted ice cream. She laughed too, unable to contain her joy. I have to admit, this is pretty awesome, she said, scooping up a handful of ice cream and playfully flinging it at Izuku. He dodged, splashing her in return. They spent the next few minutes splashing and playing, their laughter echoing in the kitchen. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated fun, a well-deserved break from the intensity of their training and the challenges ahead. Inko watched from a couch, her heart warmed by the sight of her son and his friend enjoying themselves. She chuckled softly, feeling grateful for the happiness that filled their home. As they finally calmed down, floating in the sea of ice cream, Izuku looked over at Kushina, his smile softening. Thanks for doing this with me, he said. I know it was a bit crazy, but I wanted to celebrate with you. Kushina smiled back, her earlier blush returning. You're welcome, Izuku. I'm glad you convinced me. This was the perfect way to celebrate. They stayed there for a while longer, enjoying the sweet treat and each other's company. In that moment, surrounded by the whimsical delight of the giant bowl of ice cream, they felt ready to face whatever came next. Their friendship had grown stronger, and they knew that, together, they could overcome any obstacle. Thank you for joining us on this journey through what if Deku could transform his shape to any size. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to XxAverageZombiexX for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on fanfiction.net for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.